Math.
18-year-old Christian dude that's watching this video, let me help you out. I know this world is bright and right in front of you, right? And you don't know what you're gonna do. You want to chase girls or chase this or chase that, try to buy a Bugatti, whatever the case is. Let me give you a couple pointers and advice. Number one, the first and utmost, the most important thing that you should be focusing on is your walk with God. Number one, right? Number two, develop frame. Rollo Tomasi writes in this 9 iron rules. It's the first iron rule that says frame is everything. You need to develop your own frame. Number three, make money. Okay, find a career. Start a trade. Do something that provides you enough income that you can live the life that you want, whether with woman or without a woman. But you need to have enough resources coming in so that you can either provide the lifestyle that you want or provide the lifestyle that you want with a wife and kids. All right. Number four, stay and maintain physical health. Good physical health. Okay, look, we all know scripture says the body is our temple, right? Our body is God's temple. How are you being a good steward with what you are given? So before you could worry about, oh, you need to get a girlfriend or get a wife and get kids, are you a good steward with the body you already have responsibility for? If the answer is no, then you have no business getting a relationship. You can't even take care of what you got right now. All right, so maintain good physical shape and health, all right? And lastly, number five, learn social skills, all right? We're calling it game, whatever, but learn social skills. Learn how to communicate and talk to people, go be around people, learn social skills, all right? Learn these things before you even think about complicating your life with adding a woman into it. Because if right now, if you rush to get married or rush to get in a relationship, and then you get a girl pregnant, now you married her, now you got a kid, whether you didn't marry her or not, you still got a kid, and you don't have a job, you don't have frame, you don't have that walk with God, man, that's going to test your faith, and you're going to be like, why did I do this to myself? So again, walk with God, frame, money, fitness, social skills. Learn those things. Develop those things. Get good at those things before you even think about complicating your life with a woman. That's all I gotta say. That's all I gotta say. That's it. Mic drop. I'm done. I'm out. All right, guys.
Peace. I really enjoyed that. Quick one today.
You know,
Wonderful.
We hear all these things like, right? Like guys need to do this. You know, guys told that, you know, we got to get married. Okay, cool. What is marriage? Is marriage defined by the way God says it's defined? Because if that's the case, then we have to go back to a marriage is between one woman and one man, and not what you identify as, but as God says you are by your gender that you're born with, right? And then we got to go back to, you know, well, who conducted marriage? Who was overseeing marriage back then? Was it the government or was it the church? Okay, so then it was the church, right? There was no such thing as state-ran marriages back then. So I advocate, if you're a Christian guy, why are you getting married with the church or with the state? That's what I want to know. Why are Christians getting married with the state? Why are they letting the state get involved in their marriage? If marriage rates are 50%, right, and Christian divorce is at 25%. If we have faith in God, right, then should we get married with the state or should we get a covenantal marriage? I think any woman that says, I want to get married with the state is saying, I have more faith in the state than I do in God. And that right there would be a huge red flag it should be a huge red flag for any Christian guy who wants to get married.
I mean, I would agree and disagree at the same point. I know, Glenn, you and we've talked about this at length now, but I think you're totally right in the sense that if you're putting your faith in the government today is for locking your marriage together, that's pathetic. Like, that's not who's got the keys to your marriage anyway. But I think also there's, like, you're dealing with a cultural problem. Like, I'm just trying to think of how a guy in today's world goes and tells some Christian girl and like her dad, like, yeah, we're just gonna do a covenant marriage and I'm not gonna sign any papers for your daughter. Like, I'm just trying to think how that conversation would go.
I'll be like, sir, do you believe in God?
Right.
Where
but
you show me the scripture, you show me in the Bible where it says, thou shalt get married with the state.
Right. But we had this discussion before, Glenn, on how I view it as depending on how you're going to do the marriage. Like, if it's super traditional, like I look at a lot of my friends that are like, they got 5 kids, wife's at home, she completely sacrificed her career, didn't go to college to be a stay-at-home mom, he's providing. If she has no protections, like, just besides getting some child support, like, in my mind, she's trapped with him if he's cheating on her. Like, and so I can see where the state, like the father of that woman's gonna want, some protections for her from the state standpoint. Now, the old days, it used to be like, what, dowry and stuff would handle this stuff, or the church would handle the marriage contract and how the dissolution of it would go, and that they've like removed themselves from that. So unfortunately, it's just kind of a stupid mess.
Well, my thing is like, again, we can't avoid people from consequences. So you marry the wrong woman, right? See, the thing is, like, guys, we don't have that safety net of consequences, right? So if you marry the wrong woman, she divorces you, she takes your kids, your consequence for marrying the wrong woman is now you're going to pay alimony and child support, right? That's a consequence that you have to face. Now, if a woman marries the wrong guy, he cheats on her, and she wants to leave, and she doesn't have money to leave, and she leaves and with nothing, that is the consequence of making the wrong decision of getting with the wrong guy. Right? We can't avoid consequences.
I think there's something that comes to mind too. So the covenantal marriage obviously takes priority over any contract you're ever going to have. So
yep,
you have that the repercussions that come from breaking a covenantal marriage are they're more metaphysical. Like the Bible tells us we become one flesh, right? So when you part from that flesh, okay, because you're deciding to have a divorce for whatever reason outside of adultery, you're not allowed to come back together. So it's serious as it gets. You're talking about serious implications, but they're not seen in the same way as like you just brought up the main problem somebody's going to have with a divorce. You're going to pay alimony. It's all this sort of material problems that you have. That's consequence. But the consequences, right, are material. So I think if we were really putting this into a hierarchy of what's going to matter most, the contract with the state doesn't matter that much. I mean, you're going to have to pay those things. And if you're a man of faith, say, for instance, you have a covenantal marriage and there's no contract and you end up getting a divorce, are you still going to look after those kids? Are you still going to care about you obviously, yes, because you have faith. If you're a man that has no faith, that has no desire to be faithful to what the Bible says our commitment should look like to a wife, then don't get the covenant. I mean, the contractual marriage.
My question is, why are we doing marriage like the non-Christians?
Because most people are concerned with their material possessions and
Exactly.
not so much their spiritual soul and how
So,
that's.
but I'm saying, like, if I mean, to me, it really it really questions, like, not Christianity, but those that call themselves Christians. Where's your faith? When you get married, you're saying, I'm making a covenant between God and this person, right? And really, you're sinning against God if you get out of the marriage, if you divorce for any other reason other than infidelity and abandonment, right? So you're sinning against God, not so much the person. I mean, yeah, you're hurting them, but like your grievance is really against God. So I don't need this. I don't need to have God, the state, and this person in my relationship. I just need to have God and the person, right? I don't need to have anybody else other than that. So
we had a great.
Why are we doing that in this way? Like, why don't we just say, hey, we're Christians, we get married the Christian way, which we put our faith in God that he's gonna make this marriage work, and we don't need the state as a safety net.
It kind of reminds me like murder. It's like everyone knows murder is wrong, but we have a law that says if you murder someone, you're going to prison and might get electrocuted. So I think there's not a lot of true believers out there, because if everyone was a true believer, and I'm reading Bonhoeffer and he talks about cheap grace, and I think that's really the issue. Is there's a lot of people that don't fear God. They fear everything else but God. They fear the loss of their house and their possessions rather than, I broke this covenant before God. They're fearing their possessions being lost. And so the cheap grace has made a lot of cheap Christians. And then we have this issue that we're dealing with right now. That's what I was trying to say earlier, is they're more concerned with losing their material possessions, which is that contract with the state, than they are with offending God in themselves. Right. And offending the sacred. Yeah, I agree. I think that's well put.
I mean, so ultimately, we live in this fallen world too, and so we got to be realistic with what, like, look at all the ridiculous laws of the Old Testament, like some sort of governing system over these institutions had to be in place. And so I think the church should be the one, obviously, in our case with marriage. But it's like, if the church is not going to be that governing body, like, who is going to do it in the case of divorces? Because they're going to happen. Like, you could have the greatest Christians like married together, they did it covenantally, the divorce is going to happen. And who's gonna, decide how, if it like, is he gonna just abandon his children? Like, without some authority, he literally could.
Yeah, I think the preoccupation should be with what it takes to have a successful marriage rather than an obsession with a divorce case.
Well, see, look at the preset that we just like raised. That, like, is the guy going to abandon his children? Why do we have that inclination that immediately we think the dad is going to abandon the children?
Because cheap grace and cheap marriage end up equaling guys dropping the ball after the divorce. They drop the ball in the marriage, and they might drop the ball in the divorce. Same with the woman.
But but see what I'm saying? We automatically assume that the guy is not going to still be a father.
Because most guys don't have the consequence of God. The consequence is, we're going to take your stuff, bro.
But like, if you're okay, look at the black community, right? The African American community in America, they have a better even though their fathers are not in the household, they have more active fathers in recent studies than any other race.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they're not even in the household. The kids don't even live with them.
How does that make any sense? That's weird.
Rollo pulled up the statistics, and when he hops on, because he said he's running the dogs real quick, and then he'll hop on. But it's like, so
well, it's not so much that it's like, man, it's just humans are going to be humans here, and there's got to be some sort of way to like make sure some of these circumstances like can't just happen.
A consequence. I think the debatable topic is the way the men have. It's not really a great law. There's so many laws that we have that end up becoming corrupted by men, but I think that there should be some consequence, and that's what you're kind of elaborating to, right?
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, Right now, we have a system where there's consequences only for the man if a marriage fails. But true faith requires no safety net, right?
Well, you got to take into account what the red pill and our faith kind of dictates women should do. They should be in the house, raising kids. They shouldn't be career minded. And if they are career minded, take a hypothetical. You get a divorce between a very career minded woman who's making tons of cash and her husband's doing nothing. She's going to have to pay alimony to her husband. But most cases, the husband.
I lost the screen. I'll be right back.
Where do you hear that again? Who brought that up?
I don't know. Well, women are starting to have to pay alimony because
they
are out earning men. And
so that statistic is kind of mired by that. Men are usually the breadwinners, right? And so even according to us, the way that we're saying marriage should be structured, if they were to split, the woman's going to have no recourse because we've had her in the home the entire time. Well, because ideally, in an ideal marriage, that's where she should be, is raising kids.
Not to say that women can't have careers.
Not to say that they can't have careers. We hope that if they have that and they can juggle all that at once, then good, more to them. But there is an interesting point we talked about with David, one of our guests last week, and he brought up a situation that would be much better than the one we have now for marriage and the way that the state handles marriage, and that would be that they defer to the church itself. So if you look back to the New Testament, you see the way that the Romans handled the Jews. And many times they would have issues within the Jews would have issues within their law. They would get angry at each other and they would go to the Romans and say, hey, you need to fix our problems. And the Romans would say, no, you fix your own problems according to your law. And marriage being a sacred institution is going to be defined by the sacred institution that it's related to. So that's going to be our church. It's going to be who we are. And so ideally, if you want to know what we are, the concept of marriage and the way it's reinforced and handled by the state for the three of us here, it would be that the church would be in charge of handling marriage. And divorce.
I agree.
And enforce. And then the state would defer to the church because the church hadn't dropped the ball in handling marriage. So it would clean everything up. It'd be a much cleaner thing. I mean, of course,
but that only works for Christians. So I think we should have two different types of marriages. That's why I'm saying, like, the church should operate marriage for Christians. Like the Catholics got it right in some areas, and I'm gonna give the Catholic brothers some credit here. My buddy Jimmy Miller, he's a Catholic out of Dallas, Texas, and he's getting ready to get married, and he's telling me the grueling process getting married through the Catholic Church. It goes all the way up to the Vatican, right? And they have like a records keeper, basically. So if you get divorced and it was not sanctioned by the Catholic Church, you can never get married again by the Catholic Church.
That's right. They actually teach the people what kind of an offense they're giving to God. So it's not just you're getting married, you're getting divorced. They're like, divorce is not an option. You know, and that's why for people who are uneducated, when they see the contract, it's a ramifier. That's like, yeah, you can't just walk out of this marriage, because people do not understand the definition of marriage. It goes back to that education thing in your video that we started off with. They don't have the knowledge to see the depth of what they're walking into. You know, they have
it's like what we need to have, and I really champion this, is that Christians, men, need to opt for covenantal marriage, and we need to get the church, a reformed church, get the church reformed to the point where, hey, we're going to start upholding marriage the way it ought to be, right? And we're going to keep records like the Catholics do when it comes to marriage, right? That way, if you want to get married, the church will now deal with the divorce and work that out. The church needs to be responsible. Let's not let the church get away with the fact that they have dropped the ball and they have deferred to the state.
Yeah. And every other faith can have their own recourse for that. If you're a Muslim, they have it defined by the Muslims. And if you're just completely, non-religious, then it'd be more like an LLC, like a partnership, and you could treat it as
I don't know why they even get married.
That could be a state marriage. I think there should just be two forms of marriages. You could have the religious marriages, which are outside of the state involvement, and then you can have a state marriage for the weirdos, You know what I'm saying?
We love you, weirdos.
Yeah, we love all the weirdos.
You know what the interesting part is that the Romans knew this already. You know,
I know.
they knew that if you had a culture that you were subjecting to, if you subjected them to your law, they would revolt, and ultimately your garrison would fail. So they knew that in order to truly have dominion, or you'll never truly have dominion, meaning you can't enforce your culture on a people. It won't work. And so what they did was they allowed them to have those freedoms, and they forced them to govern themselves. And it usually resulted in more peace and the being able to maintain cultures in those ecosystems where those values are very, very, very deeply rooted within the people. And you don't have those clashes happening all the time. But I agree. I mean, I think the marriage needs to be rethought. And the whole issue with the Protestant dilemma is that we each have our own pope in our church. You know, and if you have like a big, you know, sort of mother church where there's like 6 churches or maybe even 20 churches spanning the United States, it's still just a drop in the bucket. No one's really united, and they all have their own issues and their own things. And there's, you know, tons of discrepancy within the way they read their doctrine and everything. And many times when I see the Reformation with Luther and, you know, how he wanted to, and thank God for Luther and everything, but it would be nice to see everybody under one umbrella, under one church.
I agree. I just
because
think
because it just seems like a pipe dream. It's like idealism. It's like, are they ever going to get everybody together to say, let's take marriage seriously, guys? They're going to be like, you know,
well, it's like, okay,
ecumenical council to gather like Bonhoeffer was trying to do in World War II, and the Germans were getting crazy.
And how'd that go?
And yeah, it didn't happen.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's like okay, like
guys
Michael Knowles did this whole video thing, right?
About being right on their doctrine. They can't put aside their doctrine and say, well, these are pretty cut and dry biblical, you know, laws. Let's just do these couple things and all agree on them.
Yeah. I remember
like
hearing
Michael Knowles did this thing right today. Can we get well, I'll wait. Let me put a pin in that. All right, because Rollo's gonna hop on and he's gonna want to run on that.
Should we shelve? How about we shelve that conversation, like the marriage one, and then dig into some of the stuff on the topic of the day?
I would love to do that. I'm gonna
yeah. Let's put a pin in that. So
can I read the title to you, Glenn, and ask you some questions?
Please fire away, my good friend.
So this title is wonderful. Thank you, Glenn, for creating this. How to win in a world of sin. They got that right?
That's right.
There's a lot going on there. So I wanted to define what is a win for a Christian man.
Ooh, good question.
Well, okay, I think a win for a Christian man is step 1. Having a long life with your solid walk with God. That's one. All right, not being distracted by what the world says. That right there automatically is a win.
Right. Okay, and what does that look like in agency when they what is the church compared to a body, right? So
yeah,
your purpose in that body, right?
Yeah, like how are you being a functional member in the church, right? In the body of Christ? Are you developing your walk with God, and are you involved in some form of ministry? And that ministry could be just like being nice to people, you know, like that's
my dad all involved in ministry in the end.
Yeah, it is all ministry. And so it's like, what does that look like? Are you developing your walk with Christ? Are you developing that walk? Are you just going to church on Sunday, just hearing the pastors preach just to feel good? Or are you taking the time and reading your Bible, practicing hermeneutics and understanding what the Bible is saying? Are you diving into fellowships like this with the Iron Disciples and having these conversations with other brothers? Are you doing that? Are you trying to grow? Or are you just, a passport stamp Christian? I got my passport to heaven. I'm good. I don't need to do anything else. Like, are you a passport Christian? Are you a real Christian?
One way I like to think about it, and this is kind of like my own personal way to think about my life. Like, I don't do New Year's resolutions or anything like that, but when I think about like that topic of having like goals, my goal is always to be able to look back on the previous year or years and see progress in multiple things. The number one would be spiritual growth. Like, I don't want to ever look back at a time in my life, and I'm gonna be like, oh, I missed the days when I was closer to God back then. I want to
Yeah,
always
that
be
post
progressing
that
with
you
that.
put out earlier was
That's good.
amazing with that.
Yeah, I want to, like, if we're looking at our life as a stock market or like a stock graph, I want to see that thing constantly making gains. And so that, you know, that's the spiritual growth part. And then that would also include like financially, physically, stuff like that. I want to be constantly making growth in that, because I don't believe that you can just sit and coast. I think if you're coasting, you're going backwards.
Well, if you think about the
Agreed.
scripture, right? Do everything as you're doing it for the Lord, right? So are you working your best? Are you being a good steward with the resources that he has given you? Are you being a good steward with the resources you have? If you're being a bad steward with your finances, then you're not doing it for the Lord. Okay. If your relationships are failing, then you're not doing it for the Lord. If your work, if you are fat and you're overweight, you're not being a good steward. So how could you expect God to bless you in any other area if you can't even take care of step one?
So
Yeah.
being a Christian and winning is not the same as being in the world and winning, right?
No. We are
huge
set
difference.
apart. We have to be set apart.
Mm.
We have to be. I'm sorry.
And that
This
mean
is not
you're
the
setting
This is
yourself
not the
apart.
Michael Todd's church where we could fly around and have rap concerts in our services, and shaking and twerking in churches. No. We're saying we are set apart. We are different, and we have to be different.
What does that mean? How does the sinful world look at you when you're different out there?
Well, they look at you like, I'm okay. Mike, I gotta play with you here, but it's like Mike's a virgin.
Here we go.
Mike's a virgin, right? And it's
That's
like
your
people,
favorite thing to bring up.
I love it, and I hope you stay a virgin for the rest of your life. No, I'm kidding.
Oh my word.
Mike the monk. He's given the gift
I might
of
as well just
celibacy.
go out. Yeah, I might as well go out on a boat or something, fish for crab.
Remember the Bellagio fountains?
Yep.
Oh my God.
Hey, one of our guys in our group did that. That was a good way to remove yourself from society.
It works with salmon, but yes.
But okay,
I won't let you on a crab boat. I love you too much.
It's like this. It's like, Mike's a virgin. People are like, well, man, how can you be a virgin? How are you 30 years old and you're a virgin? I'm set apart. I'm not like you. I died to my flesh. My convictions are strong. My walk with God is stronger than yours is. That's how I'm able to do this. That's a perfect
I probably never
example.
make claims my walk with God is stronger than someone else's, but
No, but you know what I'm saying. It's like,
Well, you could think about it two different ways. People like in the church, they say they have this either or. You either have faith or you have works, right?
Yep.
But they work the same way. Faith will equal out to works, and works will equal out to more faith. It's a both and.
Mhm.
So when you have a life with the works that you've done, you can say that's a man of faith in so many ways. And I agree with
I would
Glenn
say
when he
it's
says that.
you take it seriously. Like, I think if your convictions, a lot of people, their convictions, I just don't think are super. They're not serious. And especially when you're younger, like, I think that's like where I was fortunate is I had strong convictions when I was young. Like, that allows me today to have the foundation to make the decisions I do. But I think it's when you're really young. A lot of people just don't have those convictions. They're not fortunate in the environment they grew up in or whatever. So I'm not going to say like I am holier than thou. I just had good circumstances, good family that I was raised in.
That's a great point.
but it's like, how do you set yourself apart? If the Bible says stay away from sexual immorality, okay, there's one way to set yourself apart,
I feel like
right? The Bible says be a good steward,
with us now.
right?
Yep.
Are you a good steward? Do you treat your body like a temple? Are you overweight? Are you putting drugs in your body?
And those are pretty broad spectrum, but like when you whittle that down, the closer your walk is with Christ,
you will define your purpose within his will in the body of Christ.
We call that anointing, right?
Well, yeah, that's what you were made to do. So you get closer to what that purpose is, the closer you get to God, and that's not going to be what everyone else's purpose. What was that visual that you gave us? You told me of the church when I was saying, like, if you were to give the church the body of Christ, see it as a person.
Oh, homunculus.
Right. It would look like a homunculus. And I don't know if you know what a homunculus is. Do you know what that is? Familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a giant head, giant hands, giant lips.
Yeah.
The rest of the body is emaciated. There's nothing there because the church has put too much emphasis on, like what John was saying, the preachers, the Pope with the Protestants, and the speakers. And one thing that I also, going back to the Catholics, that I think is great that they do with the saints, there'll be a saint. They sanctify all different parts of the body of Christ. They sanctify them, and they put saints there with stories to elaborate on. And Jenny, our previous host, our previous guest, was talking about this one saint. It's a woman who got sold into slavery and got her breasts cut off and had to go into a brothel and still remain close to God the whole time. And she was sanctified. I find that empowering to fulfilling everyone's purpose within the body of Christ, so we don't end up with the homunculus.
Yeah, I volunteered to be the asshole of the body.
There you go.
Man, so I can flush out all the shit. I'm just gonna flush all the shit out.
That's all the prophets had, man. Those guys were getting rejected left, right, and center. And then they'd have to go to God and say, can't you give me a good word to give these Israelites? Can't you give me something that's going to extol them, exhort them? But no, and being the asshole means you got to serve some shit. And the church is not interested in doing that because they are too interested in the paradigm of filling seats. The American dream has become the church dream. And the church dream has always been, let's self-persecute to show people, because everybody wants to know how you can have joy and peace during persecution. If you can do that, you can sell it to anybody. And when they see somebody who's undergoing duress, deep persecution, and there is that brilliance in them because they're filled with the Holy Spirit and they are shining brightly, that is the sales pitch the church has. That is our ace in the hole that we've rejected. And we're too busy, parading our new cars and our new iPads and our clothes and everything else as a show for how God has blessed us, instead of showing through persecution that we can have better times, better communication, better lives. And that's the serious superpower the church has forgotten. And we have to venerate that. We have to rediscover in this generation how to acquire that happiness, that joy in persecution, so that the world scratches their head and looks at us and says, well, we can't help it. They're on to something. They're not on antidepressants. They're not, sort of retail therapying themselves they are on to something different. We have to ask why and what it is. And we're not getting those questions for a reason.
Well, we ask questions. Let's ask Christians, how are you set apart from the world today?
And we should look way different than the world today for how messed up it is. So it should be like no brainer. Like, oh, this guy, I just observed him for like a week. Okay, he's a Christian because, and that's, I think, let's get into some like practical, like what's the life of a person set apart, winning in this sense.
Well, let's read from Scripture. Let's open up Romans 5, and
hold on, let me get there.
I love the way it breaks it open, man. It's beautiful. Let me know when you're pegged.
I'm almost there. Hold on.
I can probably pull it up on the screen here.
Romans, where are you? Romans 5.
Verse 1. Do you want to pull that up, Mike?
Yeah, I'm getting there right now.
Okay. I have it on ESV. Which version are you guys going with?
Same.
All right, cool.
Mike's almost got it.
Got it in 3, 2, 1.
Nice.
Boom.
Okay. Are we on Romans 5? We're on Romans 1.
We're at Romans 1.
Get it together, Mike.
I'm trying my best.
He's doing.
We don't have producer Dave here. I'm trying to.
Producer Dave. This is not the Sabbath. You don't get it off. Producer Dave.
All right, we got it up.
Okay, so therefore, since we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Through him, we have also obtained access by faith into this grace in which we stand and now rejoice in hope of the glory of God. Now, that's the part I want to focus on to begin with. So you're just saved. You just signed that spiritual contract, or your passport has been stamped. What do you do next? You rejoice in hope of the glory of God. That's what you do every single day. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings. So you rejoice in the glory of God and you rejoice in our sufferings. No, now, why do you rejoice in your sufferings? Paul's about to connect all these dots. He says, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and that endurance produces character. That's who you are. And character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. So if we take that apart, we really study this passage, it tells us what to rejoice in. It also shows us that we have to rejoice. It is like a muscle. You need to learn how to cherish and be show gratitude to God for the things he's given you, especially in times of suffering. And you need to imagine the glory of God. This is what you're called to do, to invoke the renewal of the mind in a changed spirit, set apart. This is how you show you are set apart, is in rejoicing in the hope of the glory of God. That means the kingdom to come. Our eyes are on the kingdom to come, and knowing that our sufferings are what produce character. So when we have adversity, we have trouble, we endure duress, we know in our hearts we can rejoice because our character is being built. Our character is actually being formed through it. It's like the iron going into the furnace. The impurities are being burned out. That iron is becoming more and more strong. Every time it gets pulled out, that iron has become tougher and stronger. And in the end, it shows us that it's not us, right? So look at the very end, verse 5. It says that God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. So we have this inexhaustible, intappable resource of strength, the Holy Spirit. But the way to tap it is through rejoicing in God's kingdom, through rejoicing in our sufferings. This passage tells us exactly how to bring about the renewal of the mind and showing and exemplifying how to be set apart.
Let me can we go to Ephesians 5 real quick? I'm not going to go to verse 21. Don't worry, people. We're not going to get there yet. But let's go to Ephesians 5. I really want to start off at verse 15. All right. It says, look carefully how you walk, not as the wise, but as the wise. You want to be set apart? This is how you're set apart. You don't walk like the unwise, but you walk as the wise, making the best use of your time because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what is the will of the Lord. So don't be unwise. Don't be foolish. Okay, these are how you set yourself apart, right? Then the will of the Lord, the will of the Lord is, and do not get drunk with wine, for that's debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. So don't get attached to substances. Don't be a drunk. Don't be a drug addict, right? But be filled with the Holy Spirit. So don't be unwise. Be wise. Don't be foolish. Okay? Don't be a drunk. All right? Be filled with the Holy Spirit, addressing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord with your heart.
One of my personal favorites right there. I love that verse so much. So beautiful.
It is. And then giving thanks always and for everything to God the Father, and in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. So do with this. Don't do that. Don't be unwise. Be wise. Don't be foolish. Be with, practice understanding. Don't be like party. Don't be a drunk. Don't be doing that. But be this. I mean, the Bible clearly tells us how to be set apart.
Those are
really
the best
does.
versions of those things. Like, don't be foolish, be wise. When they say bring up the drunkenness and party, love that correlation, because when you're rejoicing and when you have that joy, that's what a lot of people get when they drink. And he's saying, this is so much better. Do this instead.
Yep.
Exactly.
Well,
So
and
it's
I
like,
think-
okay, so then let's practice some hermeneutics. So how can we take what we're hearing here and practicing in everyday life? Be wise, not unwise. Okay.
Well, I see two things. That's described in both of these passages. So you have to practice self-restraint. There's a carnal battle that you have to initiate through your own will. That's why you've been given sovereignty. You have this duty to choose. And through choosing that, you're self-effacing your flesh, right? That is the first step. Then the second step is to give glory to God, to rejoice. Rejoice means so many. So if you look at the hermeneutics
Rolo's
like
here.
you want to, there's
Uh-oh.
Rolo.
We got the Godfather in the house.
Yeah, we do. What's up?
What's up, Swallow Tomasi?
Wolo.
Welcome.
Swolo Tomasi.
Let's see the gun show. I thought
What's up? What's up, Trent Lawrence?
Trent
Not
Lawrence. I'm using that one.
Yeah.
Anytime he's on our videos, that's what your name's
Trent
gonna be.
Lawrence. Yep, you got that name last week.
He's been
There he
training
goes.
hard all week.
Trend
Training
hard.
Training hard.
Trent Lawrence. Trending hard. Yes, he is.
So Rolo, we're talking about, like, okay, from a Christian worldview, Christians are supposed to be set apart, right? So they're not supposed to be doing the debaucheries of society. And now that you're here, Michael Knowles made a video.
Right.
And,
Sure, you want to talk to me about debauchery, because everybody seems to think I'm like.
well, I know everybody thinks
We're
that
supposed
you're
to go out into the world as like as sheep, but like
Sheep
smart
among wolves.
yeah, but like aren't we like supposed to be vipers ourselves or something like that?
Let's continue down this train of thought, Glenn,
Gentle
before we
as
go there.
doves, wise
okay.
as
Okay,
serpents.
let's
Yep.
finish up.
Be sly as a viper,
Something
like that. You could tell I never went to seminary. So.
Yeah. Okay. So what I was going to, so just giving some practical, because when you get saved, you get the stamp on the passport. You saved through faith, grace, right? We get all that, but then we want to try and enforce
Stamp on the passport.
That's Trent Glenn's thing. But then for the younger guys and the guys who have been sort of comfortable in their faith, we have to understand this process by which we get to set ourselves apart. We get the renewal of our minds. We get to be looked at as these holy creatures that are incredibly attractive to the rest of the world, because we're able to endure persecution, tribulation, horrible times with joy, with peace. We're actually enacting these beautiful things that allow us to cherish and show gratitude. So once you submit yourself to that, you have to make the choice. You have to make the choice to say, I am going to fight this carnal battle, right? I'm going to reject these certain things, the drinking, the excessives, the sensuality of life. I'm saying no to these things, but you're not allowing yourself to become completely sort of monkified by it. You're glorying in Christ. You're rejoicing, right? So you're finding a way to find gratitude, express gratitude, and cherish. So it's not just saying no, 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 no. Every time you're saying no to something, you're also saying yes to a promise that God has given you. And then that starts to create the character like we covered in Romans 5. Your character begins to change as you're rejoicing, as your vision of the kingdom that's to come. God's kingdom becomes more real than this one. So you become, the character itself is transcendent. And so that is a process that we call a process of sanctification. You subdue the flesh, you bring your thoughts into submission. And then at the same time, as you're feeling that heavy, heavy battle of saying no to your flesh, which is not easy, you're also rejoicing, right? And so those two things combined cause this bit of the spiritual metamorphosis,
right? To think of, I think like some practical, like daily, like what does rejoicing look like in your daily life?
You have to say,
I think what it really depends on is what part of the body of Christ you are in. You have been.
I'm the
you
asshole.
have been. What is your purpose? For instance, like he's gonna have to deal with a lot of shit every day, and farts and diarrhea maybe if they're not having a good diet. But for somebody who might be the pancreas, they have a different they'll have a different set of challenges that they will have to face every single day. And we brought up the homunculus. So we are fighting against the church seeing and glorifying certain parts of the body more than others. So I don't want to distract our audience from like, okay, here's what we might deal with. It's going to be different from what you might deal with. You might be an asshole. We're not going to have the same challenges as the mouth, you know? We're not putting shit in your mouth. We're eating the food.
I'm thinking of just like the day, like I look at like Psalms, like David obviously spent all this time writing his, you know, praising God, thanking God and whatnot. And I think like I try to implement that in my morning walk is my time to do that. I pretty much write my own Psalms and prayer to God during my morning walks. And I think just developing habits like that, even though you might not feel like it, or you might find it completely like a waste of time in that moment, I think is what will have that renewing of the mind, that change develop over time.
I agree. I think you need to practice, and a lot of the secular sort of New Agers have adopted the idea of gratitude practice. But in our prayers, so many times we're asking for things. You know, if you start your prayers off like Jesus instructed us to, and he said, you know, your kingdom come, your will be done. There's a veneration to God that's going on there, where if we practice I was practicing this actually a few weeks ago. I was being thankful for simple things like my bed being soft, nice pillows, beautiful, a toothbrush, you know, all these things that we take for granted that if we didn't have, our lives would be, you know, if I didn't have a nice toothbrush to use every night and I had to go to bed with a dirty mouth, I wouldn't feel great waking up. You know, there's small things that really you can look to God and say, wow, I'm so
helps
blessed.
Change your perception over time too. Like like if you're in a bad mood or like it just change, like it brings a positive spin on kind of everything.
Yeah. And then also praying for people, like praying. Like I remember walking home from
Bible pray for Rollo every day.
Yeah. Being creative.
Well, I'm still alive.
Prayers are working. Those trend infused prayers.
I just got the Camaro back. You should probably pray a little bit more often for me.
I'm gonna be praying for your drive down, that's for sure. But like,
oh yeah,
here's the question though. Like, here's the question. Like, so we're talking about what practical steps, right, that Christian guys could take, right? In the video that we played earlier, I was talking about having a strong walk with God is one. Right? Then, as Rollo says, develop frame. I don't think any guy should get into a relationship until he has established his own frame. Rollo, would you agree to that?
Well, yeah, but then understanding what it is in the first place. I think probably that's probably the number one thing that gets most confused. Like, I know people like get confused about hypergamy and like the nuts and bolts stuff, but like when it comes to like things like frame, when I talk about like mental point of origin, when I talk about like things that seem like they're really esoteric and they're really not, they're really like bonehead simple, but like people want to turn them into like, oh, frame, you know, they want to turn it into some kind of like woo-woo magical thinking thing, right? It has to be some sort of like magical mystical wisdom, and it's really not all that hard to wrap your head around, but people want to put like sort of mystical meaning into it. So like when I talk about frame, or when we're talking about frame in general, you got to remember, I didn't just pull that out of my ass. That's not even my thing. It's like it's a psychological term, a sociological term, psychosocial term. And like frame is just like who's like psychological frame, who's like atmosphere, who's like reality are you like living in? For example, like when you go to work and you punch in at 8 a.m, you're in your boss's frame because you have contracted your time for his money, and so therefore you're doing what he wants you to do for that 8 hours or 10 hours, whatever, however long you work. And then when you punch out, then you're back in your frame or you're in someone else's frame at that point. So frame is not just about like relationships and marriages and chicks and everything like that. It's about family. You can be if you have like a very, you know, domineering father or mother, you're in their frame. Children understand frame. Trust me.
Oh yeah. I've been there.
On their kids until they get to be like teenagers and they start, you know, mouthing off. Then that, because they're in their parents' frame because they depend on them for so much. So, and we don't even think about it. We don't even think twice about it. Right. But then until you get to like, you're an adult and then you're still in your mom and dad's frame because they're so like influential on you. Or if you're in the military, for example, you've basically contracted your life to be in the frame of whoever your commanding officer is, right? Or you're the sergeant or whoever's above you, sort of like the hierarchy, the chain of command. Same thing with work, same thing with, but that's just how human beings deal with each other. So for instance, if you get pulled over by a cop, you're in the cop's frame because he's the one who's going to decide whether you're going to get a ticket or you're going to get a warning, right? So when we're talking about frame, it's not just about like, marriages and stuff like that. But since that's what we're talking about here, the idea that you have a world into which a woman wants to enter into, then that's really kind of like where the early pickup artists sort of like, they noticed this, they understood this like almost instinctually from the very beginning. So when you talk about like submission in marriage, that's frame. You're submitting to your husband's frame is what it really is. It's like, does this guy have a frame in which, like, a world, is his world something that you want to be a part of and experience and be associated with? I don't think enough Christian women understand that that's the way it's meant to be. First of all, just not biblically, yes, but also just like basic humanity, right? So when you talk to people about, whenever I listen to people say, oh, I have a 50-50 relationship, or my partner this, I'm like, your partner is your husband or your wife? It really, because like my partner is like Glenn, and I have to, if I say, hey, this is my partner Glenn, they're like, no, my heterosexual business partner Glenn, that's who he is. Right? Just clarify that crap now. And same thing with Miguel or Mike or something like that. So, and I hate that I have to do that, but that's because that's the frame, right? People.
Well, Rolo, have you and any of your heterosexual business partners gone and got hair color and blow dryers with them?
Only myself and Aaron Clary, because Aaron Clary.
Wait a minute.
Ambiguous.
I take you to the salon.
I know. Shut up. You're blowing it for us. But the thing is like when we're talking about frame, that from a biblical sense, we see this in like, I mean, what were we talking about, Corinthians or something like that, where it's like, wives submit to your husbands, right? Husbands love your wives, right? That's an establishment of frame right there. And you can say that that's a biblical establishment of frame. Okay, fine. So you've got that, but there's also the human side of the secular, like human evolved side of our natures, is that, men are the protectors, right? I was listening to I think it was your wife the other day, Glenn, when she was talking about, we should submit. And so it says in the Bible, we're supposed to submit. Yeah. But women naturally submit because they're the vulnerable sex. And I'm the weaker sex. And you said the weaker sex, they're the vulnerable sex. Okay. because weakness and strength are relative. Okay. Because what are we talking about? What's the task? Like if you're the weaker sex, you're trying to bench 305. Yeah, you're probably the weaker sex. Okay. but it just depends on what the task is. But like children are fragile, women are vulnerable, and they historically have needed protection, provisioning, and parental investment, right? Because if they didn't, then the saber-toothed tiger eats the child and eats the wife, right? Because they can't get away, they can't run away. So that's part of the psychology. But when we're talking about frame between like human beings, you're looking at a dominant and a submissive, more or less. Or you're looking at one that's just a bit the protector, and the one that needs the protecting, the vulnerable one, and the strong protecting one, right? And that is even true in homosexual relationships. There's always a sub and there's always a dom. There's always a more dominating personality, and there's also always a more submissive personality. So you can't even get away from it in a homosexual relationship. So there's still that establishment of frame. Whoever's the most dominant personality tends to be the one that like sort of makes the rules in that relationship. So when people say, oh, we have an egalitarian 50-50, no, you don't. Show me an egalitarian relationship and I'll show you the relationship where the woman runs the show, because she's the one that basically controls the sex, and she's already got the commitment. So when we talk about frame, there's the biblical frame, which follows sort of the human side of it as well. So that's really a point, I think, where like red pill and Christianity, and I mean, you could also point out like say Judaism and Islam as well. You can see where that sort of function follows form. The form being there's a vulnerable sex and there's a strong sex, and then there's, well, wives submit to your husbands. Husbands love your wives. It's very simple. It's not hard.
I see the frame. It's interesting you saying it as frames and dominance hierarchies, because it's contextually based. And as a Christian man, our ultimate frame is our walk with God. So if the cop is asking you to break the law,
say he's a corrupt New Yorker cop, and he's like, yeah, I want you to go out and, you know, take this prostitute in the back of my car. You're going to be like, no, you're an authority, but that's not okay. And our frame kind of transcends certain people's dominance hierarchies, I would say. And when one other thing I wanted to bring up was within the cooperation between the male and the female. And you had said they're not the weaker sex, they're more vulnerable, and made that a point because we cooperate, we do different things on an equally high level. That should be the best type of relationship. To compare each other's strengths and to try to do the same thing wouldn't be a cooperative relationship. There wouldn't be benefit to either the male or the female. So I just wanted to kind of elaborate a little further on that, because I think some men and women, they get into the type of this competitive state with each other. And it's like, that's not the point. The point is not competition, it's to cooperate.
Well, that's because marriage. The reason why women don't want to cooperate and they like submit sounds like slavery. It sounds like enslavement. It sounds like you are a lesser being. And the thing is and I really even hate the word submit, but I know it's biblical, you know, at least in a King James, whatever. But I think it's more like defer to the authority of your husband. That might be a better way of putting it, as far as like you submit to your husband, right? To submit to his authority as being the person who is driving the car that is your relationship or your marriage, right? So whenever I think one of the reason, because we've trained like generation after generation of women to sort of like be rebellious, essentially, and it's not hard to do, considering that there's always been a spirit of rebellion in women when it comes to male authority. And it's easier to sort of stoke that and to poke the bear a little bit more, like, you know, kind of pick at that scab a little bit, because women today have been taught that they can have everything. They don't need a man. I know you guys were talking about that earlier too, Glenn. But the whole thing about I don't need a man, but I want a man. Well, the thing is men and women both need each other, because women are the vulnerable sex and men are you know, comparatively anyways, the stronger sex, right? We're really the sacrificial sex, if you think about it. People want to say, well, men are the disposable sex. Yeah, they can be, but we're the sacrificial sex, meaning that we are expected to do more. We're expected to, at least as far as our responsibilities are concerned. The problem is that we've piled on responsibility after responsibility on guys, but we've given them no authority that's commensurate with that responsibility. So I can't affect the things that I'm responsible for unless I have the authority to actually do that. So, and I mean, I've said this a zillion times, it's like, you know, responsibility without authority is the definition of slavery. Well, if you take that and you twist it, you do the opposite of, you flip that script. If it's 100% authority and 0% responsibility, that's tyranny. So between those two, which sex is the tyrannous one, and which sex is the you know, the slave at that point? And so when we start talking about submission, women think that they're losing the authority. They think that they're flipping the script, right? Instead of having 50-50, which it never really is, it's this, oh, well, I have responsibilities without authorities, instead of deferring to my husband's authority, who is supposed to be the one who's driving the ship, you know, who's setting our course for us as a family and as a couple and as a married couple. And that's hard to do because we have systematically conditioned at least the last 3 or 4 generations of women to just like out of hand, just distrust men. That's all it is. Men are just simply untrustworthy. They're either buffoons. They're like, you know, Homer Simpson, you know, Dr. Huxtable, everybody loves Raymond. They all look like Ross from freaking Friends, right? He's the buffoon, the idiot who daddy who needs mommy to save him from himself. And then, you got this idiot. And then you got the guy who's the borderline abuser, so that he's Tinder swindler, right? That she can't seem to get away from, and she can go to the battered women's shelter, but she keeps going back to the asshole abuser. And so the guy's sort of either borderline abuser, he could be, he might not be, but the fact of the matter is when you can't tell if he's an abusive person or he's not, that uncertainty creates distrust. And then you've also got more recently, really, with the millennial generation and Generation Z, is the incompetent guy, who is the kid who can't tie a bow tie, right?
Can't lunch.
Yeah, he can't drive a stick.
Change a tire.
can't change a tire. He can't like tie a double hitch knot. He can't do like God knows he can't back a freaking, trailer into a spot, with a boat or something like that.
One thing I was thinking about yesterday with this, because we were actually talking with Jenny on this topic because she was saying how these women she knows, like, they don't trust. She's like, you picked this guy. Why don't you trust him? And kind of one theory I had, I'll just bounce off you guys, is it's kind of a pretty new thing that women had sole selection power over the men they would date. What is that, probably the last couple 100 years at the most? So I view a lot of these women, they go through especially their younger 20s, selecting guy after guy that is not what they wanted, and then burning themselves. And then when they do finally pick one, they actually don't trust their own decision making on the man. So the guy that they end up married to, I think in the back of their head, because they've made so many previous bad decisions on men, they're still like, well, do I even have the ability to make a good choice here? Did I make a good choice? That's something I was thinking about.
That's a good point.
I think that's
very good.
When I was thinking about Michael Knowles today, because we're talking about marriage now. So let's get to this Michael Knowles thing. Like, he made.
Can I say one more thing about frame though? I want to ask.
Go
about
ahead.
it. Before we come off this subject, because I was wondering about this. So as believers, you know how Jesus says it's enough to become like your teacher. You don't want to become your teacher. And I think about the qualifiers for when we're sort of switching frame, because if you're like being taught by a wonderful teacher, he's like, if I'm going to be learning from Romolo Tomasi, I'm going to be switching into his frame. I have to make a conscious effort to turn off some of these. It's almost like a insecurity, right? Like if you're too secure about what you believe, you can't be open-minded enough to absorb something new. And so you kind of have to migrate into somebody else's frame. And as believers, we have to do that with our teachers. Sometimes we have to do that, and it's a part of our lives. So I guess my question to you is, it's very difficult to really pinpoint that moment in your life where it's like, I'm going to be putting myself into somebody else's frame. But I think it's the most important power we have, or one of the more important powers. So it's not happening subconsciously, because I think what happens a lot within male and females, I read this book by Juice Merlot about the rape of the mind. It's called Menticide. And he talks about the power of a conditioning force. So I think women have a lot more power, most cases, to condition because of their verbal fluency and the way they're able to be very, very consistent with what they say, that they end up being better conditioners than men are. So they will push men into their frame, not because it's qualified or it's better, but because it's sort of like they've exhausted the man to that point. And so if the man is only subconsciously realizing when he's switching frame, then he's going to be sort of oblivious to this very horrible switch. And so it's very bad for him. So how do you get better at noticing when you're switching frames, and how to do it to desire a good outcome, like with a teacher, say, or when you start to be conditioned by a loud voice in the room that's just spouting bullshit and you just sort of give up? How do you...
isn't that like the death by 1,000 beta?
Yeah. And give up. Not only men, women aren't the only ones who do that. I mean, if you've been in a podcast where there's a really loud, person, they condition the whole room, and before you know it, it's like the only thing that's important is that person.
Yeah. We have that girl on every episode of Vegas Access Vegas. If she's that girl, we know who and by the way, it's not just we have mostly girls, so that's what we say it, but like it can be guys as well. There's always that guy or that girl, the one who sucks the oxygen out of the room.
The dom.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, and then they're always speaking at about like 5 to 10 decibels louder, and they have a mic, right? We can hear you, dude. Really, it's okay. You don't have to be 10 decibels above everybody else. But they do that because they want to. Well, first of all, they want to establish frame, and they want to establish dominance. That's number one. So they're gonna. And there's people who can tolerate that and still like maneuver around them, and then there's people who just basically try to match volume for volume. Okay. But you are correct. When it comes to men and women, there's almost like this default setting that, especially today, because if we go and look at how, like, when we talk about 80% of guys are beta males, they're the unattractive guys. They're the invisible guys. Those are the guys who are going to accept a woman's frame by default, because their way of thinking predisposes them to saying, well, I don't have a girlfriend yet, but when I do, she's going to be the most important thing in the world for me. I'll just do anything she wants me to do. I'm going to love her without condition. And I'm going to, because I know that that's just the way to have a really good, healthy relationship. And I'm going to keep it fresh, and I'm going to keep it, I'm going to just default to her and just try to make mama happy as best I can. Right. Because if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. And it's like these guys are pre-whipped, right? They don't even have a girlfriend yet, but they're already whipped by the girlfriend that they don't have yet because they want to make sure that they're okay. I'm going to make sure because I don't want to be like other guys. That's how I'm going to make myself unique. I'm not going to be like the dudes that will just, abuse them or be, incompetent or whatever. I'm just going to do everything I possibly can. And they essentially end up shooting themselves in the foot because they become the woman that they want to marry at some point. They think about how they're going to be a better servant, how they can compete with other guys by out serving them, by out pussying them, by out, identifying with them. We always talk about the cuttlefish, the sneaky fucker game, right? Where it's like the male feminist who wants to sort of mingle in and mix himself in with the women so that when all the alphas go away, that surprise, I'm actually a dude, and then that's their form of game. It's actually cuttlefish game. The cuttlefish do something very similar to that, where they mimic looking like a female cuttlefish, and then when all the male cuttlefish go away to sleep or do whatever the fuck they do, then all of a sudden they turn into a male cuttlefish, and it's like, surprise, I'm actually a male. And exactly. And so now that's why I call it cuttlefish game. But the thing is that essentially what it is it's this identification with the feminine, because that frame of mind, or for guys like that, think that the more like they are with women, the better they will be able to relate, the better women will like them, because they think like attracts like, as opposed to opposites attract, which is really the truth in it. So
what you just hit,
how about
Rolla, what you just hit was like, women have become the man that they wanted to marry.
Mm-hmm.
And these beta guys have become the wives that they wanted to marry.
And so you got to, the reason why I'm even bringing that up is because if you look at it in the 80-20 rule, for example, if you look at like 80% of guys are undesirable, they are unattractive to women. Then there's the 20%ers who are kind of, they might do if they can just like get their game together and get their look together, whatever. And then there's the 4.5% guys who look like Justin Waller, who are going to get laid no matter what. Right. So, but the 80% of guys, so you're already starting from an overwhelming majority of guys who are already preset or prepared to relinquish frame as soon as a girl pays attention to them, as soon as some girl, gives them the time of day. You want to know why women don't like to compliment men? It's because of the 80% guys. Because if they compliment them or they apologize or they do in any way like something, just basic, consideration, the milk of human kindness, right? They say anything, a kind word to them. Those guys take that as a sign of interest, an indicator of interest. And so that's why women don't give compliments. They don't apologize very often, because they know that if they do, then that guy's going to go, so there's a chance, like that kind of attitude. So, but you're already starting at a deficit for guys who are like in that 80th percentile, I guess, who are sort of.
How about the guys in like the 20% who kind of got it together? They have a frame, but then it's chipping away at it. Like, how do they recognize that?
So those are the guys who have to give themselves permission to have masculine authority. Most guys today, you want to know the biggest problem with men today is they don't give themselves permission to be men, but they don't give themselves permission to expect a default level of authority. So, for instance, when people think I'm an arrogant son of a bitch, right? Because I'm hanging out with the girls that Mike hangs out with at a bikini contest. Like, oh, isn't he married? Blah, like just stating the obvious, duh. So here I am. But like the thing is like, the reason why they have a problem with me is because way back in my past, I gave myself authority to say, you know what, I'm not getting what I want because I keep doing what I've done. So I'm like, I don't care what people think about me anymore. I honest to God don't care. People go, oh, you're an old guy. And you're the one commenting about it. And I'm the one that's out here at the Wet Republic Bikini Contest. And you're still sitting at home jerking off and typing into your computer, taking Adderall all day. So when I look at it in that sense, I could just say, you're right, dude. I'm sorry. I'll try to be who you want me to be. And I'm never going to do that because I've given myself permission to sort of put myself first and think about myself first. And then what happens is when I do that, when a man gives himself a permission to have even just a default, like a small level of authority in his life, that's when the crabs want to pull the other crab back down into the bucket. because they don't want the other crab to get out of the bucket. They want, misery loves company. No, misery loves complacency. And they want you to be just as complacent as they are, because no one gets higher and no one goes lower. We all just go along, and hopefully, we get to the end of this life and we all can be buried in the same grave at the same level. And it's bullshit. But that's where frame comes. I'm answering your question here. So that's where frame really is established, when you give yourself permission to have frame. So when you look at people who have like very strong dominant frames, I usually use Steve Jobs as an example. If you've ever read the biography of Steve Jobs, everyone that worked with Steve Jobs back in the day said he had a reality distortion bubble.
Yeah, I remember that.
Didn't know how it got done. He didn't care how it got done. This is what I have in my head. This is the idea I have in my head. I want you guys to take it out of my head and put it into reality. I want an iPhone. I want an iPod. I want a watch, whatever. I want an iPad. Here's how it's going to work. Here's how it's going to look. And this is why it's going to look the way it is. And people are like, that's impossible. How the hell are we going to do that? Well, they made the impossible possible, because he had this complete reality distortion bubble, and that was his frame. And all the people that worked at Apple, and all the people like Steve Wozniak and everybody who was in sort of his inner circle, plus anybody who was outside of that circle, they all knew what they had to do. They had to make his ideas become some sort of reality. And that's really how frame works. They were operating within his reality distortion bubble, and through which they actually created some pretty awesome things as a result of it. But that's the idea when I'm talking about frame. Now, most guys, most men, the 80%er guys, they would never pretend or even dream that they could ever expect or be entitled to even this, smallest amount of authority, because they've always been hammered flat by women, because women are more powerful than them. Women have default frame. And if they ever hope to solve their reproductive problem, if they ever want to, lose their V card, if they ever want to get laid, they have no other choice but to enter that woman's world and hope to God that she's going to, look down on them and say, okay, show them pity and give them a pity fuck. And then hopefully they're going to marry that girl. And it's going to be one of these like fantasy.
Nice guy syndrome.
Nice guy syndrome. The beta who made good, and by the way, that's a very strong narrative for like superheroes and stuff like that. If you look at like, say, Spider-Man or even Captain America, all it is some scrawny kid who goes from being this, complete like weedy little, beta male, and he takes the super sauce or something like that and goes into the chamber and he comes out Captain America, or he gets bit by a radioactive spider and he goes from weakling pussy beta male to having like, with great power comes great responsibility, right? They're alpha males who just through the luck of the draw or some supernatural occurrence turn them into Spider-Man or turn them into Captain America. But there's still betas in here. But out here, they're alpha males, and I'm Captain fucking America, right? That's fantasy, though.
It's still a battle, I'm sure. Like, say the guy has it together, he's done what you said as far as giving himself permission, but he still has got, he's 5 years into this relationship, and he's got that death by 1,000 betas going on. Like, how does he maintain that? Because I'm sure that everyone's gonna have some complacency slip in, especially over years. Yeah. How do you pay attention to that?
Well, you have to, first off, you have to give yourself permission to be somebody else. You have to give yourself permission to be better than you were. Like this is not even my phrase. I'll give it back to, I think it was Mystery Method or somebody back in the day was saying, you only get what you've got if you keep doing what you've done. And
keep improving.
Yeah. At some point, keep improving, or improve it all would be good. Right. But, there comes a point where like, I say this in like at least 2 or 3 of my books, where when guys tell me like, why is it so difficult to unplug guys? Why is it so difficult to like sort of share red pill stuff with people? Because they'll hate on you. They don't want you to turn into somebody else. The first thing, you'll always run into resistance from your best friends. You'll run into resistance from your brother, from your family, from your dad, from your mom. If you try to like be something greater or something more than you are, human beings want to see predictability. They don't want something. We live in a very chaotic world, so we try to put it into order. We try to see patterns. We're very good at pattern recognition. So when Johnny decides, you know what, I'm done being a beta chump. I'm done getting sand kicked in my face. Now I'm gonna get in the gym and I'm gonna lift weights. I'm gonna get yoked and everything, because I'm not gonna take it anymore. the first thing we told Johnny is, you're trying to be somebody you're not. You're trying, who do you think you are? You're a poser. You're trying to actually become something more than you are.
Those aren't real friends.
And yeah, well, they're not real friends, but they're also, maybe they are, but they're friends that want to see you stay the same thing, because then you're predictable. They don't want they don't want erratic behavior from you. They want to know what they get every time you walk up and go, hey man, how's it going, Mike? Just great. All right. That's what, hey, let's go smoke some weed. Okay. Let's go get that's what they want. Let's go bowling. That's what they want. Some predictability and some regularity and know what to expect from you. And then what happens is you go through something traumatic, like a breakup. And then you're like, what I have been doing is not what I want anymore. I will only keep getting what I've gotten if I keep doing what I've done. So when you change yourself and you build yourself into something more, you will always have detractors. And sometimes, actually more often than not, the people who try to keep you in place, keep you predictable, are going to be your family. They're going to be your friends. They're going to be some girlfriend who put you in the friend zone. And then you're like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm going to get to the gym. I'm going to be something different. I'm going to build myself and make myself into something more. People are scared of that, because they want you to be predictable, because the predictable you stays in their frame. The predictable.
Well, and Roland, that would actually fall in line with what Michael Knowles just did.
Okay, yeah, throw that one at me.
Michael Knowles if you guys haven't seen it, Michael Knowles just did a video talking about the red pill, talking about how Michael Knowles debunked the red pill and Andrew Tate, right? And his whole narrative is guys should get married. Guys should get married. Guys should get married. Blah, 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 blah. And my argument for him is, well, what is marriage? Are you doing it the way the Bible says, or doing it the way the state says? Because you and I, Rollo, we have talked about marriage many times, and I agree with you. I do not support the way that we do marriage today. I think the way we do marriage today is not right. And if we're going to fix marriage, if marriage is going to be fixed, then they probably should go back to some religion style marriage where there was no state involved. Get the state out of marriage. Make people have more faith in their relationship. And if they don't have faith in the relationship, then maybe they shouldn't get married, right? Mm-hmm. Remove the state. Now you don't have the money aspect. Now you don't have, alimony and stuff like that. But Michael Knowles is not giving a solution. He's saying, no, guys, you're stepping out of our frame. Our frame is you need to go get married with the state and risk going down the divorce machine.
Well, Michael Knowles is just following suit with a lot of these other guys right now. He's done this before, but Matt Walsh has done the same thing. I mean, it's basically the broken record at this point. And I get it. He's just trying to provoke. That's his producers know what's going to play. They know that I'm going to make a reaction.
Yeah, he didn't make that video or choose the clips, I'm sure.
They know I'm going to do this, right? The first thing I did, because Justin Waller actually features a couple, and they just basically make a cartoon out of the people and that's all they do. They made it literally. They almost made a cartoon out of Justin Waller. And you're taking all this stuff out of context for a 10-minute video just so you can have your moment of catharsis. And the thing that gets me is I'm married, and what, Joe or John, which one of you is married?
I'm married too.
Okay. So but see, here's the thing. Here's the difference between me and Michael Knowles. I've been married for way longer than Michael Knowles. I've been married for 27 years. And I've yet to make a video going, hey guys, I'm way better than you. Here's my receipts. I have a 27 year marriage, and my daughter just got married at 25, and I could totally do that. I absolutely could. I could have done that any point in the last 20 years. Actually,
we're doing it next week. Doing it next week.
Yeah, but see, and some people think that suddenly everybody thinks that that's a flex, unless it's Rollo Tomasi that's talking about it, right? Because then it's like, well, Rollo Tomasi don't get no hoes, man. He doesn't, he doesn't practice what he preaches. Okay, well, first of all, I don't preach anything, period. And then second of all, it's like, well, how do I win? How many real man points do I get per kid? How many real man points do I get per year of marriage? Right. So you'll notice he didn't use me in that video, because someone amongst his producers knows well, Rollo's been married for 27 years, so you can't really go at him. But they throw in Andrew Tate. They throw in Justin Waller. They throw in some kid who's supposed to be this red pill representative. I don't know. I've never heard of this TikTok.
I've never heard of that kid ever on TikTok.
And basically what they're doing is they're just trying to set the stage and make it as ridiculous and straw man as much as they possibly can. And the funny thing is like, here's Michael Knowles. And I think that Michael Knowles probably wouldn't last more than 20 minutes across the table from me and Mike Sartain, and most definitely not James Sexton. Okay. James Sexton is the divorce attorney I just interviewed. He's a good friend of mine. Interviewed him back in August.
That was a great interview.
Yeah, thank you for that. I thought so too. But it was actually one of my most well-watched shows, certainly this year. Anyways,
it was riveting the whole time.
And here's the thing: is I really wish I would have had access to Jim when I was debating people like Ruslan or debating like Hafiz, for example. That all Michael Knowles is he's just the Daily Wire version of Ruslan. He's just the Daily Wire version of Hafiz. It's these guys who got married and they want some sort of affirmation for, their marriage. And I don't know if Michael Knowles has kids yet, but I don't know how long he's been married. But for instance, Matt Walsh is the first one to pop off about if he has a new baby that's born, and it's always a flex. I'm doing things the right way. Well, okay, but the thing is I think that people, like, from a biblical sense, from a Christian sense, hell, even from like Muslims and from a Jewish sense as well, is the institution of marriage is not what it used to be, and it has fundamentally changed in the last 20 some odd years, 22 years, right, of the 21st century. Right around the 21st century, that's when we started questioning our 20th century way of doing things. And so now you can go and have like Adam 22 and Lena the Plug on whatever podcast, and they're married. That's their husband and wife. They screw around and bang, random. The terms of their marriage is they have an open marriage. Destiny and Melania, they have an open marriage. They're married. They're legally married. They are husband and wife. Are they? Justin Waller he's not married. He's not married, but he's in a long-term relationship with one woman, and he has side pieces, and he's got wife and more or less a wife and kids.
Do you think though this
be married? I mean, kids, because by other people's definitions, sometimes it's well, I'm married, or for instance, like if Mike Sartain and Kylie ever get married, the conditions of their marriage will be like, yeah, well, we're faithful to each other, and the boundaries are this, but Kylie's going to go bring women into our bedroom because that's just the stipulations of that's in our wedding vows.
Well, that's why I like guys like that are on the Daily Wire, because they are kind of being like, well, this is what true marriage is, and it should be cool to think about it this way, versus these other people like, yeah, get married and do all this other stuff that has nothing to do with being married. So they're kind of are drawing a line in the sand, which I do appreciate, because it's cool to make things cool, and a lot of this generation, they don't think that that's cool. So there's got to be some people out there that are making marriage look cool and having kids look cool and making this stuff look cool and being happy and joyful about it in the midst of all these other guys who are kind of corrupting what the marriage is.
And I understand you, and I feel you, and I do agree with that. But in the age of social media, especially when it's unignorable, whether it's me or anybody else saying, you know what, be careful. Like me, for instance, myself as a Christian faith man who's been married for 27 years, I'm having a conversation with James Sexton, who is a divorce attorney, saying, not necessarily don't get married, but these are the things you need to watch out for. Get a prenup. Like, do you even know what the legal ramifications of getting married are? Most people don't. Before they get married, they know more about their house payments, right? They know more about the title of their house. There's more legal documents to sign to buy a car or to buy a home. And people are more well versed, anyways. They should be, anyways. If they read all the fine print of all the things that they're signing for the title company and the mortgage company and what they're going to have to pay as far as their monthly payments and stuff, they have a better education of that than they do of the legal implications and legal ramifications of modern day marriage today. That was one of the things we talked about. And there should be, what's funny is like we always talk about like, if you're going to get married, you should go to church and get a premarital counseling and things like that. And I okay, great. The thing is that premarital counseling should also include, here's what you're signing up for from a legal sense. And by the way, James Sexton tried to do that at like early on in his career. He tried to go to like what are
Let's go into the wedding conferences.
Yeah, the wedding thing, you know. So like, you know, here's how you get your cake and your flowers and everything. You want to set up shop and say, hey, like a prenup. Try, you know, maybe you guys want to consider getting a prenup. They wouldn't even let him set up a booth at the conference because they'd rather sell you the fantasy. They'd rather get you into the machine. And I hate that it's that way. Because I'm not against, I keep saying this, I don't know how many different ways I have to say this, but I'm not against marriage. Clearly I'm not. But the thing is like, I'm just against the way that we do it now and like not going in with both our eyes open and everything. But the very fact that I would say that, if I was to say that, everyone on Michael Knowles' audience would go, aren't you married? Aren't you supposed, like, I'm supposed to be like really on their side and pro marriage and everything. And I am, I'm just like, but I'm against like, didn't see it coming, you know, like how could she do this to me kind of marriage, right? And, you know, when I talk to Jim, it's like, he'll give you the numbers. 56% of marriages fail, 56%. Divorce rate. If you look at the rate of marriage today in the United States, it's at 5.1 per 1,000 people right now. So it is at the lowest rate it has ever been since we started keeping those records back in like 1849.
Well, it was something that Jim said in the interview, Rolo, that like really like made me think about this. He said, no, we got to look at marriage two different types of ways. There's the marriage with the state and then a covenantal marriage. And then I'm like, wait a minute. Why are Christians doing this with the state involved in the first place? Mm-hmm. Like,
that was exactly the. I don't know if you guys have read my fourth book, Religion, but that's exactly the question I put to Dr. Everett Piper when I had that debate. I took the anti-marriage side of it. I hated to do that, but somebody had to do it, right? But I told him, I said, look, you know, why not separate it into like a covenantal marriage? Because I knew at that time when I was interviewing Abu American, who was who's Islam, he's a Muslim. He had 3 wives then. I think he might have 4 now, but you know, he was saying that he could never be like legally married to 4 women, at least not in the United States, right? So they have covenantal marriages from within Islam. If they want to have more than 1 wife, they can't do it legally through the states. So they just have the ceremony, and it's basically accepted by himself being the husband and the wives that he has from the wives. They have a covenantal marriage through the Quran and through their shared religion. But as far as the legalities are concerned, yeah, I mean, they could still say, hey, look, I have a common law marriage with this guy. They still have legal protections through the state, depending on like what state they live in or what country they live in. There's still going to be like legal protections, even in a covenantal marriage, Glenn. Well,
there's only 8 states.
Like Ryan Stone's never been married to his very long time girlfriend, but they're basically common law marriage. So if they were to ever split, she could still like get him for, you know, spousal support or something like that.
Well, that'd be like kind of my question too. Like we were talking about
the state out these days. You will never get the state out.
Well, there's only 8 states that actually. There's only 8 states that recognize common law marriage right now in the United States. I looked it up earlier today. Actually, I'll pull it up right now. The 8 states that have common law marriage are these ones right here. Hold on. They are Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, Montana, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Texas, and Utah. Those are the only states that recognize common law.
Surprise.
Well, here's my question on that we were talking about earlier, though. Like, because obviously we're talking to a Christian audience, and we're talking to likely people that want to do their marriages anyway in more a traditional fashion of like, you know, wife's at home with the kids, none of this 50-50 stuff. So like, to take your daughter, for example, like if he came to you saying like, I'm not actually going to sign the marriage contract with you or with her, we're just doing a covenantal marriage. She's not having any career. She's working, you know, staying at home. We're gonna have like 3 kids, whatever. And like, I just feel like in that circumstance, the woman is kind of screwed if he steps out on her or whatever. Like she has to just stick it out because she has no protections of that marriage clause. So that's kind of like the circumstance I was thinking about. Like, I can see both sides of this argument.
Right.
In the circumstance of like the traditional marriage setup where the woman is forsaking going after her career. She has no income earning potential now after if he like steps out on her.
Well, who do you have more faith in, the state or the God you worship?
Thank you. That's what I said.
But we also deal with humans, and the old Testament's full of laws dealing with this stuff.
Oh yeah, very legalistic. But that's really what it boils down to. It's like who do you put your faith in? Because you can say, well, I need fail safes. I need an insurance policy so that in case he becomes a drunk alcoholic, porn riddled, escort, hooker paying son of a bitch, that I need to be able to make sure that I am taken care of. Well, first of all, you're going to probably be taken care of through other means as well. Like, for instance, she's got me, right? I'm the dad that wants to, I'll do anything I'll do anything you say. But the fact of the matter is I could say, because if you go and you look at, say, like the covenantal marriages, like between in Islam, for example, it's all dependent on the parties who are involved in it doing what their roles dictate to them. Okay. For instance, I've actually written essays about this on Substack, where it's the difference between like patriarchy versus like gynocentrism. Patriarchy is actually a very balanced system. That's one of the reasons why women hate it so much, because it balances male responsibility with a commensurate level of authority. So in a ideal patriarchal society, a man knows what his responsibilities are, what his duties are, but he also has the authority to affect those responsibilities. So in an ideal, I'm not saying idealistic patriarchy, if a guy fails in being a man or fails to live up to those responsibilities, first of all, he's probably going to have, in a patriarchal society, going to have other men that are going to hold him accountable for failing his responsibilities. And then second of all, if he has those responsibilities in the first place and he's actually meeting them, he can only do so if he has the authority to enact the things that he needs to make those responsibilities, right? Women look at that and they see it as tyranny, when in fact it's way more balanced than a one-sided relationship or a quote unquote 50-50 relationship, where neither party, like ideally neither party has authority or responsibility. Well, the problem with that is like in the 20th century, we expect men to have 20th century responsibilities and 0% authority. Well, because anything that would be exercised by men, any kind of authority whatsoever, seems like misogyny. It seems like he's just trying to exercise because he's got a swinging dick and that's how it's going to work for him. But when it comes
to like, Rollo, if you think about it, like if you get rid of marriage with the state, now that puts responsibility for people to make the right decision, right? You can't go, if she married the wrong, if your daughter married the wrong guy, right? God forbid, and they get divorced, right? Well, that decision, there's a consequence for picking the wrong guy, for not vetting him out properly. And that is now you gotta go back home. You're going back home to Papa Rollo.
So now you know why I sort of like preset the conversation here with, you've got the Homer Simpson, like, the doofy dad archetype, you've got the borderline abuser archetype, and you have the incompetent guy archetype. The one thing you will hear women constantly say is, do you remember when Allie did that one video about how she submits to her man and Pearl was all in it and everything? It went viral. I think it was like May of last year or May of 2022.
Yep.
And everybody, all these women on TikTok lost their minds. And you know why they lost their minds? Because the first thing that came into their mind was, what if he cheats? What if he becomes a drunk alcoholic piece of shit? What if you get fat after you get kids and he trades you for a trophy wife? He starts banging his secretary. And then what are you going to do? You got to make sure you have fail safes. You got to make sure you have your own career. You have to make sure that you're protected. And that's really, I think, especially in the 21st century right now, that existential fear that guy is going to leave. By the way, that's loss of return on investment, right? It's a sunk cost is what it is. Sunk cost situation. Whereas like, I put all of my eggs in one basket. It turns out that he actually wanted to bang his secretary. Now I'm ass out. And what am I going to do about it? Well, that's why we need to have divorce laws, and that's why we need alimony, and that's why we need child support, and that's why we need contractual marriage and not covenantal marriage, because we don't have any faith in God. We have faith in the system, and we have faith in these fail safes because women are scared shitless that they could never trust a guy so much that they would put everything into that they would put everything into this one guy. And God forbid, because he either won't measure up to what I hope he will, he won't ever live up to his potential. He'll never make partner in the law firm or become a surgeon or become more than he is, because he's a lazy piece of shit. And now I'm just as stuck in that situation as I would be if he were to become a lawyer and become like a high value guy, and then I lose him because I'm not as hot as I used to be, and he starts banging his secretary. That fear is what motivates women from the time they are 5 years old to the time they're 65 years old, because they're looking for that insurance policy. They're looking for that fail safe. And that's how you get, I don't need a man, I want a man. She doesn't need a man because she's a strong, independent woman. Independent of what? Independent of men, because they don't want to depend on men. So essentially what you're saying is, like, for instance, I could say, well, I had this conversation with James Sexton, is when we were talking about prenups. He's like, yeah, it's really tough to get women to agree to a prenup. Why is that? Because it's this pre-knowledge that if things go sideways, I'm not going to be covered. It's like signing an affidavit. It's like signing some sort of agreement that says you won't be able to come after me or shared assets or anything in case I start banging my secretary, in case I don't actually measure up to anything in life. It's this pre-knowledge. And so people say, well, that's not really romantic. It's not necessarily that it's not romantic. It's that you lose the fail safe of what the state would have already provided for you had you not signed that prenup. And that's why I keep saying, like, women don't marry men. They marry a lifestyle. And that's really what they're hoping for, or the prospects of a future better lifestyle if they stick it out with this guy and he actually measures up to whatever their hopes and dreams are, that they bet on that horse and he becomes a winning horse.
Well, I kind of see marriage and we'll just split this demographic for us as just the Christian demographic, people who confess Christ and they're taking their faith seriously. If you look at Matthew 17 and you look at what qualifies a divorce, in the very liberal camps, you have people who say, well, it's adultery, right? Then there's other camps where they say it's not even adultery. You can't get out of divorce, right? So if you enter into marriage seriously with your faith and you look at the fact that the only way out is adultery, and then even after adultery, you cannot remarry. Like, your wife cheats on you, you still cannot remarry until she's dead. That's what the Bible teaches. If you're going to be conservative and actually read the book for what it says, then if you go into marriage with that mindset of what the Bible teaches you, that this woman is even if she cheats on you, you're not going to be able to remarry. You're not going to be able to have sex. Like, you are a monk for the rest of your life. Then that state contract doesn't seem like anything. It's like the littlest thing. It pales in comparison to the ramification of the covenantal marriage. You may as well get her name tattooed around your forehead. That's how serious it is. You're not walking away from it. And so that's going to cause you to do a way better job with the small stuff. And going back to that discussion on frame, how do you keep framing those long-term relationships? What do you do?
We need to hit some super chats here. I've been neglecting them.
I got my first $50 one. Wow, it's crazy.
So Rusty Fuel here. Marriage is a life and death union covenant where you are totally joined together, spirit, soul, body. 1 Thessalonians 5:23. We got make concubines great again. Okay. The church will not change. Majority of its admin and more than half of congregation are women. Feminism runs in it and picks out men that don't offend to lead. Time to make our own church, even if just small groups. Kind of agree with that. Christian! Join the Iron Disciple small group, bros. Make concubines great again. Michael Knowles and the other tradcons do not care about men. They only care about the votes, as single women vote blue. They're never brought up self-deletion / most male issues. They only talk about men to solve women's issues.
They know that, like, yeah, I've said that about 1 billion times. It's like the people who want to go out there and really pitch marriage to guys, or they really want. I've heard Ben Shapiro say this. By the way, the people at Daily Wire, they are controlled opposition. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. I know that sounds really tinfoil hat, Alex Jonesy of me. They are, especially after the shit that's been going on with Candace Owens recently. They're controlled opposition.
Don't hate on Alex
got
Jones. We love Alex.
They got so much hate on. It was interesting to see the TradCons hate on Daily Wire for their Tate interview, and also hate on Tucker Carlson.
You know why they're hating on the Tate interview? Because Tucker Carlson, they hated on that, of course, because of that. But then you got Candace Owens, who goes hard against like Steven Crowder, right? Steven Crowder, by the way, like born again, like married his virgin bride when he was like 19 or 20 or something like that, and very evangelical guy, very self-righteous, writing essay after essay about how he did everything right, and now look where he's at. But you've got Candace Owens going hard against him. Then Tate comes around and she does this just softball interviews with Tate going, oh, it's okay. It must be the Matrix. They're coming to get you, Andrew, and all this other stuff. And then now you got Russell Brand and she's like, those allegations might be true against Russell Brand.
Yeah, it's very...
Tate has this.
He got roasted for it. That's why.
Decades of like bad praise of him, like basically self-snitching. No, I think it's Russell Brand.
Her and Tucker didn't put pressure Tate on anything. I thought they could have they had an opportunity there.
Just trying to suck his dick.
I laughed my ass off when I saw that. She like, you're coming at Russell Brand after that softball interview.
Yeah.
Who the fuck are you?
Well, that kind of goes into I think the backbone of the name of the podcast that we're doing right now is you got to take the good in with the bad. There's some things that Daily Wire says and represents that may be good. There's some things Michael Knowles says that may be good. Andrew Tate, same thing, mixed bag. And if we have grace and pathos for this man, for that man, we should have it for some of these other men too, especially brothers.
Okay. So I agree with you. I understand that. Like there's rules.
Well, just to show the young guys, because they're going to expect, that hero worship is going to, heroes will fail you.
How long do you listen to that and then you hear a conflicting message, but it sounds like it's like aligns with what you like, so you're good with it? Like, at what point does like the good message, like the stuff you agree with, at what point do you go, maybe it smells like bullshit? Maybe this guy's just saying this because he knows it's what I want to hear.
Well, I think people who are pre-charged with vitriol because they've been hurt, like this pagan, political system we have, where people are just, it's a cricket fight, an ongoing cricket fight between people, and they're just like investing themselves in this pagan garbage instead of, actually living in Christ and the incarnation of Christ. They're going to be picking their winners, and so then they're going to be making caveats for their winners, foibles and idiosyncrasies, and then they're going to be ignoring those, and they're going to be pointing those out in the other people, and ultimately it's just hypocrisy on both sides, and it shows the weakness of people.
Hold on, I gotta say something real quick. Rolla, why is Brian messaging me on Twitter saying, seriously, bro, he didn't like my tweet where I told Michael Knowles, like, why are you talking to the hoes on whatever podcast and not Rollo Tomasi? For some reason, Brian didn't like that. He messages me, seriously, bro? ? I'm like, what, dude? Like, what did I say wrong? You have hoes on your show. You have hoes on your show, Brian.
Brian, we have hoes on our show too. Really. So does Fresh and Fit. Should I? God,
come on, Brian.
She won't kill me for this. Should I introduce you to Tiffany Fox?
Hey, Glenn, this is your super chat, right?
That's my super chat, my $50 one for the first time. Thank you, repent. The Old Testament laws is beautiful. 1 Timothy 1. Young men should shut up and work until they have accomplished something. I love a lot of what you're saying. The cross is easier to bear than sin. No king but Jesus. Zoomer zealot, rise up. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that $50 super chat. I appreciate you.
Sure, Timothy's New Testament, isn't it?
Yeah, that First Timothy.
Oh, good. He maybe he was looking for one of those
Christ
old
is king, bro.
Yeah, I think is that $50 pesos? Is that pesos?
What?
Close enough.
I don't know, man. It's got a weird little.
Penn, thank you. Thank you for the 50 pesos or P, whatever.
Gracias.
Thanks,
maybe it's a language barrier. There you go.
So, Rollo, like, I made a video a couple weeks ago saying, like, look, okay, for a Christian guy, here's what you got to do. You got to have your walk with God set. You have to have frame. All right. You have to have money. You have to have a career. You have to have, physical physique. Make sure your physical health is right, in shape. You got to have social skills, right? Know how to communicate with people before you could even think about getting in a relationship.
There you go. The social skills that kills everybody.
Yeah. But it's like, you got to have all that before you even try to complicate your life with a woman. Michael Knowles in the video saying like, oh, you should get married young. Well, let's face it. Today, you can't afford to have a stay-at-home wife at 20 years old, okay, making barely $40,000 a year. You just can't do that. Why doesn't guys get
the most
better?
Consistent divorce factors is marrying young. The younger you marry, the more they talk about, well, if you have X amount of, partners before you get married, your likelihood of getting divorced is X, Y, and Z. You know what? That pales in comparison to demographics. So like couples that get together, like say like at 19 and 20 today, they are astronomically more likely to be divorced than if they get married, like say in their mid 20s or even in their late 20s today. And I will tell you why that is. And it has nothing to do with economics. It has more to do with sunk cost and return on investment. You want to know why most women don't want to get married between the ages of 18 and 28? Because that's their peak years for being like, that's their peak sexual market value years. You're not going to get a woman to be married. I mean, a very attractive woman. You're not going to get more attractive, just depends. But like between 18 and 28, that's when women are like exploring their options. The only time you hear women getting really frustrated and pissed off at guys is right at 28 years old. And if you don't believe me, go have a look at my video.
What's her name? Landry.
Well, go ahead and look at
Tommy. That's me and Laren. Joe. That's who we talk to a lot.
Look at Tommy Laren. Tommy Laren lost her shit at 28 years old, and I know because like what was it? Dr. Phil wanted me to go head to head with Tommy Laren when she did that video. Right, 28 years old, right on time. And she's out there just raging at guys like, oh, they want these Tatianas and they want these young girls. And like, because she's trying to get with guys who, like, she's 28. She wants to get with a guy who's like 32. Right. But the 32-year-old guys don't want to have anything to do with 28-year-old, naggy, bitchy, that vocal fry that she has. No, like what guy wants to deal with that shit. Right. But she is entitled to the guy who's 32 years old. But that guy wants to get with the girl who's 23. Right. Yep. And not her. And again, she's like at least semi-famous, right? And she's, she's not a bad-looking girl. She wasn't a bad-looking girl, but it's just that, that attitude, right? That vocal, frequency when she talks and stuff like that. And she just doesn't understand that.
It's painful.
It's so where is my man?
I had such a crush on her when I was in college, and then when I actually listened to her on The Blaze for more than like 2 episodes, I was like, okay, I lost all.
I understand why you're single. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's true. God damn it. But like, and so I remember when she threw that out there, and I could not resist. And that is still next to the Will Smith episode I did. That is like one of my #1 most trafficked videos that I ever did was with doing that reaction video to her. But the reason for that is she was 28, and the lights are coming on at the club, and she's starting to realize that her 28-year-old self would never be able to compete with her 22-year-old self. And it's not that the Tatianas and the young girls, these men have like infantile, fragile egos. They only want to get with young girls. No, they just don't want to get with you. But they
would probably want to get with her if it wasn't for her personality.
Yeah, the recreational use only for sure. But like the fact remains is like between 18 and 28, women are not marriage minded. You want to know why 28 is the average age of first marriage for women and it's like 29, 30 for men? It's because women aren't ready to get married until they're chipped. They go, well, I got to cash out of the sexual marketplace and the lights are coming on at the club and I better stick the landing and I better figure something out within the next, 29 to 31 years old. Because that's their epiphany phase. That's when they all want to go back to church and do things right. And they want to make this guy, well, I got this guy, he kind of might do, but I want him to prove to me that he's worth my while and want to do things the right way. I'm going to make him wait for sex, even though I never made a guy in my life wait for sex, but I'm going to make this son of a bitch wait. And so now suddenly the marriage mindedness and the maternal instinct and the quote unquote biological clock starts kicking in right there, all conveniently right around 28, 29 years old. And like I got into it, and I want to say it was either with Lila Rose or if it was one of these like female like Christo red pill chicks, right? I forget who it was. But she was saying something to the effect that like, well, why is it that red pill guys want to demonize women who want to make a change when they're 29, 30, 31 years old? And I'm not doubting your sincerity. I'm sure you would pass a polygraph test if you were asked, are you sincere about wanting to change your life and be, get your walk right with God and go back to church and do things the right way? I'm sure you are 100% sincere about that. That's not the issue. The issue is, it's at 29 years old. Where was this when you were 23 or 22? Because you had way more options back then. That's why. So when you look at like Glenn, when you're talking about, finding a girl who's between say like 26, 27, 28, somewhere around there, that's really kind of the sweet spot for guys, I think, if they want to get married. But the most consistent factor in a couple getting divorced is youth. Is getting shotgun marriages, right? Or the equivalent anyways. But you get married at 18, you are like 10, 12, 20 times more likely to end up divorced before you're 30 than if you got married, say like at 26, 27, maybe even later than that. The likelihood of the duration of your marriage is going to be a lot longer the longer you wait. And I would say I lay that firmly at the feet of women because they're the ones who are actually deciding whether they're marriage minded or they're not marriage minded.
Yeah. And that's why I say like, okay, for a guy, have your conviction, have your walk with God, establish a frame, know what that is. All right. Learn that first. You got to understand that whose frame you're operating in everyday life. Okay. Then make money. Make sure that you could provide for yourself. Move out of your mom's house. Stop living in the basement. Can you get to the point in your life where you could provide the lifestyle that you want to live? And if you want to bring somebody into that lifestyle, make sure you can provide for them as well.
So let me throw out a confounder here to you guys, to all of you guys, is average age of first marriage for men today, Christian or otherwise. Average age of first marriage is 29 years old. Do you think that guys are going to hold out, save themselves for marriage when the average age of first marriage for men is 29 years old? Because, and I wrote about this in the book, I've quoted Dalrock on this a million times before. One of the reasons why we have premarital sex and everything, like what is it? 88% of people have had premarital sex before they get into a marriage. You're asking a guy, and I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. I'm not saying it's impossible. It is possible. I'm talking about possibilities. I'm just saying you're asking the average human male in 2023 to hold out and not get laid until he's 29 years old, assuming that's when it happens. The reason why I brought this up is because I was watching don't talk about Mike. I want to talk about Lolo Jones. Lolo Jones is still, quote unquote a virgin, right? She's tearfully on TikTok or Instagram Reels or something like that, getting her eggs frozen because she's still, the Lord hasn't brought her husband yet. I'm saying that's either a personal problem with you, Lolo, or it's something, chemically wrong with you.
I know two girls in that situation. They're in their low 40s.
Right. And they're still, and at what point do you go, maybe it's not, see, the battery's exhausted. That's because you didn't put a battery in the ZV10, Glenn.
You're using batteries in your camera? That's
we just put a battery right now. I know. I have the dummy battery. Don't worry.
I know you do.
But that's why I'm like, wait, battery exhausted. Hold on. I've seen that screen before. But no, I was going to say is like, so, but just hear me out here. I'm not saying it's right, it's wrong. I'm not saying it can be done or it can't be done. I'm just saying, on average, how likely are you going to be able to tell the average guy who's Christian or not Christian, say, hey, look, you know what? Sorry, you can't fuck until you're 29 years old because that's when you're most likely you're going to get married. That's a pretty tall order. Or for women, for example, you're 28. You're probably not going to be able to have sex until you're 28 years old because you got to save yourself from marriage, and the average age of first marriage is 28. That goes back to the youth thing, and that goes
go to the struggle that Mike's dealing with, right? I'm not trying to put him out there, but like, you know, he's at
I'm
30
done
years
answering
old.
this question. John and Joe can take it.
But like, no, Mike, like let's talk about your dating. Let's talk about not who you're dating or when the dates you've been on.
Well,
the women that you've told me that you've dated on, the women that you told me, like so-called Christian women that you dated, like they were bad. Like they weren't even worth your time.
Well, don't even go there right now, because what I want to hold that thought. Don't even go there right just yet, because what I'm saying is, like, you want to know why a guy like Michael Knowles says get married early. Well, yeah, of course. Because if your only option to get your dick wet is to get married early, that sounds like great fucking advice, man. But
they wouldn't do it if they knew if they knew how serious marriage was. They wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
I think the dilemma, it's a cancer at the root, because the marriage of the church to Christ is what we're trying to. If that's not taken seriously, then the downstream effects of the marriage between us and our wives and our husbands, that's not going to make any sense either. So really what it is we have serious issues between the church and its marriage, its commitment, its devotion, exemplifying the bride in Christ to Christ in the West. So we don't have any of the social structures to have those early marriages actually work. There's no examples out there. They're not seeing it. It's because the church isn't taking their position as bride seriously. The American dream has become the church dream. And therefore, you have these epiphany stages and all these other symptoms of a diseased society. You know, if the church was exemplifying their bride and their commitment and devotion deeply, you could have early marriages where kids are, 18 kids were getting married, and they would be reinforced by their families and their societies so that they could actually handle it. But we've strayed so far from that you're going to have people get beat up, learn the hard way. And it's kind of ironic, because it's like, how long does this stuff have to go on before they realize that this decade gap of debauchery and hedonism is unnecessary? You know, how many of these burn up stories do you have to hear before it's come full circle and people are like, well, maybe this is not the way to do it. Maybe high body counts isn't the way to do it. Maybe there's a different way to have families. Maybe in your younger years, when you're most attractive, you should be attractive to your husband, go bang like rabbits, have kids. And then as you get wiser, you have your kids in your 30s and you have grandkids in your 40s or your 50s. You know, this is the ideal, situation where you have 4 generations together to learn from each other instead of maybe 2, if you're lucky. And then they don't even know what great grandpa did or anything like that. You have no legacy that way. There's no legacy.
Cat's out of the bag.
Right? So let me throw out. Look, there's a lot to unpack right there. First is there is a concept amongst. Well, I mean, you could say this is amongst demographers or evolutionary psychology. I'm trying to think who else would be a good. I mean, hell, even sociologists would say something like this. But there's a concept that's called genetic gap. And genetic gap is that our technology as human beings outpaces our ability to keep up with it and process it and then figure out best practices, not only for ourselves personally, but as on society as a whole. Right up until, maybe the very beginning, like the first quarter of the 20th century, we could keep up with that. But like one of the examples I say is like, when was the Wright brothers like created went to Kitty Hawk at 1906, right? So by 1906, and then you fast forward to 1966, we're just about ready to put a man on the moon. Okay. Thanks, so we've gone from just figuring out how to make an aircraft fly to now we have jet engines, and now we can break the sound barrier by 1966 ish. Right. So you look at the amount of that's an advancement in human technology that is astronomically fast. And so when you look at that in other terms, when you look at it in terms of like, say, hormonal birth control, that is a huge technological leap for human beings. And splitting the atom, atomic energy, also another dramatic leap. Then you've got personal computing. Now you've got the age of the internet. Now you've got social media. Now we have the whole entire world's knowledge just right here on this little device that's sitting in my hand. If I were to take this back in time to 1920s, people would call me a devil worshiper. They'd say I'm like a lunatic for saying something like that, right? But you're only talking about like maybe 100 years ago. And so the problem is that our technology affects the way we live personally, and then the way we live personally then affects the way we live in a social order. And so what happens is as soon as we figure out a technology and what we ought to do about it. Like, for instance, we're just figuring out what to do with like social media. We say, oh God, it's evil, it's hedonistic, it's whatever. I wouldn't say it's the technology's fault. I would say it's basically just making people more aware of what human nature actually really is. And so now we can just see it live in real time, 24/7 on Twitter or on whatever, you know, and human beings didn't evolve to have a camera keep surveillance on them 24/7. So how does that affect how we view privacy laws or the Constitution or I mean, there's so many questions about technological advances and technological things that affect the society. And then by the time we figure out what our best practices are and the best way to use them in the church and in society and our voting process and our democracy and our politics and our personal lives, by the time we figure that out, we're already 3 or 4 steps past that because a new invention or 4 new inventions have already made those decisions and those best practices obsolete. So how does that affect?
You know who understood that really well? And I've been studying them because they're sort of like the forlorn brothers that everyone looks at as crazy, but the Amish. And they kind of paid attention to a Second Temple piece of literature, the Book of Enoch. And it describes the Watchers coming down and giving technology to the women, and the women using this technology to, what it really describes is a perceived freedom is not always going to benefit society. So you have a perceived freedom with your phone, but it ends up compartmentalizing your life and obstructing your actual freedom to grow, right? So it restricts you. And so how do you measure the freedoms? And I was thinking about this with the technology in relationship to technology being a freedom or being able to express to individuate you further and differentiate you from society, which is what we all want. We all want to be differentiated. The sameness is what kills us and causes mental anguish. We want to differentiate. The Bible would call that anointing, finding your place in the body. But these forms of technology give you a false pretense in being able to discover that. And then it's actually destroying society, and you see that happen all the time. And that's why I have some admiration for the Amish, because they actually have a symposium or a council of men who go through and they ask themselves if there's a technology that'll be okay for that won't destroy their society. So it's not a perceived freedom for the individual, which is attractive because it's going to give me this, this, and this. But then they ask themselves, is this good for the society that we live in, or is this going to hurt us? And that's a question that if society doesn't start asking that more before they start, it's a whole discussion with AI. We see that. It's like, okay, what's going to happen once we let the chains off of this thing? Or, it's that
the genie's already out of that bottle, actually.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely agree.
That conversation was like decades ago, but like, yeah. I mean, the other thing is like, you're also dealing with unknowns too. So for instance, I mean, it's great that the Amish elders get together and have that conversation. By the time they're done debating it, there's 10 more innovations that have already made obsolete the conversation that they just had. So, and I'm not saying it's a bad idea. It's just that we're too slow at it. And by the time we figure something out, some other smart son of a bitch has come up with something else, and they've already lapped you 10 times on the track of life, right? And so in doing so, they've also taken away your freedom to actually even have those conversations. They've taken away, and I'm not saying like in a tyrannical way, but just by default, because they came up with a new technology that sort of nullifies anything that you thought you were debating prior to that. And again, the technological advancements get so rapid. But the point I was making was not so much about genetic gap as it was about the fact that I think that the discussion about should young Christians get married earlier. Well, okay, if all of the elders of the Christian churches all got together and said, okay, this is what we're going to do, and we want to emphasize having more strong marriages, and we want to emphasize having, women be good Christian women and men being good Christian men. Well, what does that look like? Because I bet for the large part, you couldn't come with a consensus to that, because to even have that conversation would make you financially infeasible. To even have that conversation at that point would be like,
well, we got to look at like If we're
We
talking
can
about
Sounds like what you're describing is apocalypse. Like there's no way out. It's going to perpetuate, and it's a Rene Girard sort of idea of apocalypse. Like
well, I
it's
think what a lot of
inevitable.
people tend to like get out of like the whole like, oh, you need to marry young. They got married young in the Bible. Yeah, but men became men at a very young age back then. Like
Well, and that
men
would be
today,
my that would be
are
my
not
personal
men until like
solution.
their 30s. Like when you were younger back then, like 15-year-old men were going to war. They were men, back then at 15. So
Well-
yeah, you could see why they would say, oh yeah, they get married young. These young guys got married young back then because they were matured more. They had to go through more. They had more responsibility than we do today. Today we don't have all that. So it's like when they read the Bible and they say, oh, you guys need to get married young. Why? And then let's get back to the fact that it says, Paul even says it's better for you not to get married than to get married. So it's like even if the guy that wrote about marriage in the Bible is saying, hey, it's better for you not to, if you can withstand it without the lust, then it's better for you not to do that. Why is he saying that? Because marriage will complicate your life. And there's this process here like, hey, it would be better
back
for
to
you
Rolo's
not to
question,
do
though. Let's go back to Rolo's question on like, what do you tell the guy that's got to like chop his balls off for 10 years? Because my solution would be Christians need to set in a culture and environment that they can get married young and that they are prepared. Like they need to be outside society in that sense.
I think the Catholics do the best job of that.
Yeah, well, even the freaking Mormons do. But because I like, my anecdote of where I grew up is definitely like an outlier. But I went to probably a dozen weddings when I before 22, and all these people are still married now about a decade later. They all seem to have great marriages, and they ran into it. Like I got friends my age with 5 kids, and they're just running traditional lives. They got 5 kids, they work, and they figured it out young. And
how much of that is like developed by the social buffers of their community though? Like,
well, I think it's just it's a ripe environment for that to actually work, like created by that community that I grew up around. And I think it's something to replicate.
Okay, so here's and I'm playing devil's advocate here because I would love for everybody to have a good, strong marriages. Don't get me wrong. If you tell a guy, let's say you got a 16-year-old son, and you go, hey, look, you know what, Johnny, you can't have sex until you're 18 because that's when you can get married. And you say the only way you're going to get laid is if you get married. Well, Johnny's going to figure something out in those 2 years between 16 and 18 so that he can go and do that. Because one of the most consistent things I see across the board from young guys is they are way more marriage minded between 18, 20, 22, 24, somewhere in there. They would love nothing better than to get with a girl who is about their same age, maybe a touch younger. But the problem is that the girls at that age don't want to have anything to do with those guys because the women at that age understand that their potential, their peak years they burn bright and hot and then they cool right off, right? For men, it takes, the joke is what men don't become men until they're 30, right? So for guys, I'm sure they would love nothing better than to get married at 19 and then say, hey, look, we're a success story. And I married my high school sweetheart. Meanwhile, his high school sweetheart and all of her girlfriends that she knew in college or in high school or in church or whatever, who are still single, she's living vicariously through them. She's living vicariously through The Bachelor. She's living vicariously through, her girlfriends who are on social media 24/7. And she's only watching the highlight clips, of course, of their lives. And by the time she gets to be 30 and she's played house for the last, 10 or 12 years, and she's got 2 or 3 kids in tow, then it's kind of like, what am I doing? Why did I get involved with this guy in the first place? And then you get that sort of, making up for missing out or that regret that, your life that could have been. Meanwhile, she's going to her girlfriend's wedding who just got married at 28, 29, 30 years old. And she's asking herself if she'd made the right decision. She did the right thing. And I would say it's more of a female-centric, gynocentric attitude that's really, you want to talk about what's destroying marriages, not guys. I'm sure guys would like nothing better, especially if you convince guys the only way you're going to get laid is if you get married. Of course, they want to get married at 18, not 28, man.
I think that ambivalence comes from a lack of education because you see that same phenomena take hold with people's faiths. They go to college, then they meet a professor that's teaching them evolutionary biology, and then all of a sudden they're an atheist. And that happens because they were not told about the other side of the arguments that they're going to be engaging. They were told, you're right, this is absolutely right, but they weren't taught how to go about in the opposition that they're going to face. They weren't being taught their arguments, their line of thinking. They strawmanned it the whole time, and then when they actually have to go out solo and look a professor in the face and give them a thesis on their faith, they can't do it. And the same thing happens for marriage. I mean, we're talking about sacred things. So they felt they had a sensation of the sacred, but they could not delineate it as a cause of action. They could recite their church's creed, but they hadn't internalized. We have a relationship with Christ. They that hadn't become paramount to everything else, and so it becomes destroyed. It gets destroyed, or it causes ambivalence and doubt because they weren't instructed to begin with. If you have little Johnny and he's like, look, dude, I know your nuts are blowing off your body. If you want to be a man, you're going to learn how to control yourself. You have to learn how to do this. Every single civilization that had thinkers, especially the Greeks, they were taught to be able to self-govern these urges, these fierce urges. And to say, if you want to be able to be a man, you have to govern these things. This is not an easy thing. It's hell on earth, but that's what life is. You got to bear your cross. The world we live in is fallen. If you don't find a wife that's good, that's the way this world is. It's not selling them a sugar-coated piece of shit where they're going to feel let down. You let them know the horrors of apocalypse in their teen years. You let them know you have to face it every single day. And it's the sugar-coated church that we live in that does not distribute church truth. And that's what led Bonhoeffer to have the same exact thing that happened in the German church is happening here. And they can't handle truth to their ears because they're too used to the honey and the milk. And so if you're teaching your kids that stuff, they're going to go in their 20s. They're going to be warriors in college. They're going to know all the arguments. They're going to be able to encounter all of the other friends that are having promiscuous sex. They're going to look at them and see rot instead of brilliance. And they're not going to be attracted by it because their appetites will be conditioned by a family life that actually gives them dignity, gives them nobility, gives them a galvanized that's the veneration of their faith. They can venerate their faith like Paul did when he was in prison. He wasn't winning when he was in prison.
The problem that we have, though, like you said it right, though, like what Michael Knowles did is just giving you honey and milk, right? Get married. It's a great thing to do. You got to have kids. That's what real men do. That's your purpose. Be a real man.
But I don't think any real Christians go into Michael Knowles to get like hermeneutics or like teachings on their Bible. They're going to him for entertainment. It's entertainment. I don't go to Michael Knowles.
Like, hey, don't you tell Brian that he's got a quality show there.
I don't know who Brian is, but if Brian is a believer and a brother in Christ, I'm going to be like, yo,
he's the host of whatever podcast.
Yeah, he's the host of whatever podcast.
Well, Brian, you know, there's tons of great resources out there where you can study and actually use them as like, hey, this is a teacher. This is an academic teacher who is schooled, a scholar who's going to teach you about. It's not Michael Knowles. Michael Knowles is a very charismatic person who can.
Let's face it, we live in the world of influencers now. I mean, people have this cult mentality, right? And they get attached to a cult. They get to the Andrew Tate cult, and now they're the Tate cult, right? Andrew Tate can say nothing wrong. You get the Michael Knowles cult, the TradCon cult, and then it's like, yeah, men have to get married, and that you're not a real man until you have a wife and kids. And yeah, you know what? She may divorce you. She may go take half of your shit, but it's okay because that's what real men have to do to endure life.
I don't think it's worse than that, though. It's like it's not even that bad. If you're a Christian man and you're married, you became one flesh with that woman. That's not going to change until one of you die. Like the contract is like nothing compared to that, and they're not being taught that, so they fixate on the contract because it's going to affect their material life, their metaphysical condition, their eternal condition, their more vital condition is connected with that marriage. It's not a flipping piece of paper. It's going to take your house. She can take your house and everything, and you still be one flesh with that woman. So those are the conditions people aren't being taught. So it's like, yeah, if you're walking into that marriage having the knowledge the Bible dictates marriage is supposed to be, then you're not going to care about the contract that much. It's going to be the pimple on the ass of the real contract between you and God. but they're not
But
being
if
taught
that's the
that.
case, then you're not going to care about the marriage or the contract.
So
It's
by
gonna
that
mean
logic-
it's just a nothing thing. It's like telling your buddy your car can do 120 miles an hour and him asking if it can do 70. It's like, I just told you it could do 120. It means nothing. Of course it can do 7. The contract that you're getting into, the things you stand to lose, if we're going to just talk about the losing side of things, have nothing to do in comparison to the contract you have with God.
So by that logic, then do you disagree with what Mike was saying about how there needs to be some sort of contract and some fail safes? So would you be okay getting married without the state involved, just having a ceremony, and then as long as there's an understanding between you and your wife or your wife to be, then you don't need a contract. You don't need.
No, you don't. But personally,
I would actually
personally,
no certificate, no record with the courthouse.
Okay, so if we're talking practically, just like for a practical situation, which I think Brother Mike was bringing up, say for instance, I have a woman and we're deeply in love. I know where her heart is with Christ. We have both talked about what marriage means, and we both understand what it is. And her father, say for instance, he wants me to sign the contract because it's going to make the whole family connect. Under those circumstances, I would play along with the game to be able to have the family. I'm not going to give him a lesson. He's an old goat. I'm not going to give him a lesson on why it's more important. I will have that conversation with him. I will tell him where my heart is, where the Bible stands. It's not like we're going to push that aside. I'm going to tell him what I think is most important, what I think is marriage is all about. But if in order to make that marriage happen, and under those circumstances, me and the wife, my woman, we're both connected, I would do that because I don't think it would interfere with the progression of our marriage. It wouldn't interfere with our devotion and our commitment.
Okay, so if her father insisted on that, then it would just be a formality for you.
Many ways. Ideally for me, I would like to see the church. Like we talked about this earlier before you hopped on.
Well, you're married though, so
I am married. I signed a contract. Yes, I did. But I would like to see it the way the Romans handled the Jews. You know, they had the Romans understood and respected these ecosystems of law and religion and culture that existed within their dominions, and they allowed them to be the way they were. And so much so that they wouldn't interfere with those things. So they would say to the Jews, you deal with your own stuff according to your law. What your marriage law says, you do. Don't bring it into our courts. We don't have enough time and space to put in the effort to go and figure out what you guys are saying. So you'd handle it yourself. So I would like to see that happen in the United States. I mean, this is ideal, but, you know, have the church be in charge of divorces, have the church be in charge of marriage and handling, you know, single women, like Paul said, looking after the widows, having a real, you know, structure involved with maintaining these sacred institutions, because they're sacred. You know, if you want to get married and like an atheist or somebody who's not have the sacred associated with that, it's like an LLC. It's like a sort of partnership. It's like, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and do that. The sacred qualifiers of marriage that we have as a Christian religion. I hate using the word religion, but it is what makes us who we are. It comes all the way back from the church being the bride of Christ. It's what we have to offer the world in the form of the perfect representation of relationship. And that's what the world is desperate for, to be recognized in a relationship, to have good communication, to have a legacy, to be able to have community that cares about you. That's all we want. And so that would be the ideal situation.
Let me another hypothetical here. Let's just say, for sake of argument, the woman's father, your soon-to-be father-in-law, was just, he's like, you know what, you guys, I trust you, you go do what you're going to do. Like, he has no, if you want a contract, fine. If you don't, that's fine too. If it's up to you, what do you do?
I'm doing covenantal.
Covenantal all the way.
Covenantal. Absolutely.
Yeah. Covenantal.
My original position is more of a devil's advocate one. Like, that's the one circumstance, like, I could see like an argument for it. Like, if I had a daughter, she's not going to, and I'm not going to send her to university. And I would probably be thinking in my head, like, she's got, yeah, that's the circumstance that I'm thinking of anyway.
Rollo,
so
like,
your daughter's marrying an
let's
atheist
like,
or something?
No,
came up to
He's
you,
pulling
Rollo.
the old goat, dude.
Oh, old
Hard.
goat, right? That's what I was thinking.
Rollo, let's say your son-in-law came up to you,
Yeah.
right? And he's like, look, I want to
Good
marry
perspective.
little Rollo daughter, Junior, you know,
Really?
Mrs. Tomasi Jr. And, but, I'm not going to give her a contract. I want it to be a covenantal marriage.
Mhm.
Do you go into that? And he's like, I read your work, I love your work, and I see how the way marriage
Mhm.
society is, and I don't want to do it the way that everybody else is doing it. So I want to do it this way.
Mhm.
Do you give them your blessing? Like you're like, okay, cool.
Well, first thing I ask is, it's my daughter on board with that, right? Do you and my daughter, do you have that strong a faith in your faith? You have that strong a faith in each other as well? Is that like, are you both on the same? Are you equally yoked? Right? Are you both?
Yeah.
Are you both of the same mind? Right? If the answer is yes, then covenantal is fine. Go for it. Do what you're going to do. Right? I honestly, I don't think, like, when I say that I am 100% on board with marriage, I just don't like the way that we do it now. The way that we do it now is the contractual side, right?
Yeah.
It is, because when I remember when you've heard me joke about this before. I remember when same-sex marriage got ratified, and when Obama was around, they put the rainbow flag on the White House and all that crap, right? And I remember people saying, yeah, gay love wins, right? And it's gay marriage. It's like, no, it's not gay marriage. It's same-sex marriage. There's a big difference right there. And so when people were saying, well, how does it affect you, Mr. Heterosexual, white, cis, het, whatever the fuck you are, traditional heterosexual marriage guy, how does it affect you? It's just about love, blah, blah, blah. No, it's not. It's about the definition and the contract that is marriage, not the actual, pairing of two individuals. It's about the contract and how we define marriage. Well, they're not trying to redefine marriage. No, they are. Because now it's same-sex marriage. And I joke about this. And I said, me and Aaron Clary could get married. He's heterosexual. I'm heterosexual. And the contract that we have in our wedding vows or whatever else is like, okay, Aaron, you can go fuck as many random girls as you want, and me too. And that's the contract that we have. But you know what? The minute you start sucking dick and you become a homosexual, then that's beyond the boundaries. Like, we're setting, like, essentially the conditions of our LLC as
Yep. It's an LLC.
Yeah, exactly. So it becomes an LLC, right? Because the state doesn't care how the terms of your agreement, the terms of your contract. I talked about this with Jim Sexton, right? They don't care about the terms of your agreement. It's just up to you. If the breach of contract is between the two of you, and you, like, traditionally speaking, if it's closed on my end and closed on my wife's end, and she goes and fucks around on me, well, that's a breach of contract. And now I can, like, say, okay, we're getting divorced, right? You cross a boundary, and that's the holy grail, right? So if I say that, and if I'm married to Aaron Clary, right, and he goes and starts crossing the boundary and having homosexual sex with somebody else, then I feel like I'm cheated on, and now I want to file for divorce in my same-sex heterosexual marriage with Aaron, right? But here's the thing: is, like, as I was saying before at the very beginning of this, is that you've got, like, someone like Destiny and his wife. They're still man and wife. They still have a marriage. According to the contract, they're married. Same thing with what's the other guy? Adam 22. He's married. He's in holy. I've got seen the wedding picture. She wore white. I've seen the thing. So I know that they're married, but by everybody, as far as I'm concerned, I'm pretty sure we're all in agreement on this. That's not really a marriage. That's just people fucking around who have a marriage contract, because the contract is screwed up and not necessarily the way we define it. So what we're really talking about is not marriage per se, but how Christians define it, how Jews define it, how Islam defines it, how, so what's right and what's wrong. Really what it comes back to is what is your ideological bent for that? Because in a Christian perspective, it's at least now it is closed on my end, closed on her end. Well, if we're going to talk about biblical marriage, what kind of marriage are we talking about? Because Father Abraham had, like, Sarah, and he had another wife, and he had, like, God knows how many maidservants.
Oh God.
Different.
Get into this.
They're in the Bible. That is biblical marriage. But we don't do it that way anymore. But their contract, their whole, as we were saying before, you, God, and your family and everything, because there's no state really involved in all of that. You say, well, yeah, she's my wife. Oh, and that other girl over there, that's my wife too. Oh, and these concubines over here, I got 4 of them, so I can still fuck them, but, like, I'm not married to them. But everybody knew that was just the way powerful men were back then. Father Abraham was a patriarch. He literally was the patriarch, right?
Well, I mean, we have a different view on that. We've talked at length with Brother Glenn on it, because there's 2 ways that, as you grow in your walk, you're going to start getting lessons out of Scripture. There's a very explicit lesson that you're going to get with a more subjective mechanism of interpreting Scripture, and then there's like the hermeneutics, where it's like what's implicit, what's implied with these stories as we're reading through. And so Adam and Eve, you got a pair, right? It wasn't Adam and several others. In addition to that, you have Judah's, Israel's forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Isaac was the only one with one wife, and you heard basically nothing. That means whenever you hear nothing about somebody in the Bible, that means their lives went pretty well. The book Enoch, right? He walked with the Lord. He was close to the Lord. He got taken up into heaven. We all wish there was like 50 chapters on Enoch, but you don't get it. You get one verse. Same thing about Isaac. Abraham and Jacob, on the other hand, you can add King David. You can add the wise King Solomon. They all had what you just described, polygamous relationships with different tiers of relationship. You know, they had the wives, the concubines, the servants, whatever. And they all had, what's the implicit lesson there? Incredible duress, problems, all from that polygamy. And so we see
more problems.
More and more problems. What happened with Israel when they had their form of adultery, right? They had the Asherah poles, different things that they worship. They had discipline from that. They had problems from that because they didn't worship their one true God. So in the way that we model things is that the way that we see the Old Testament is there's an implicit lesson where God will bless you even if you have a polygamous like Abraham and Jacob. They didn't have those stories to draw from. We do. So we stand in different shoes, and that's why you see that sort of progression where people start to understand it was Adam and Eve, right? It's one pair. Just like the animals going into Noah's Ark, there was a pair of the animals. There wasn't a whole bunch.
Let me throw a monkey wrench in here real quick. If Father Abraham and Sarah just decided to say, you know what, we're just going to be monogamous, and we'll just have faith. Hopefully, we'll have some kids, whatever else. You literally would not have the tribes of Israel had it not been for them being.
Well, you wouldn't have Islam. Is what you wouldn't have. You would have Israel because Israel came from Isaac, but you wouldn't have Islam.
You wouldn't have the tribes. You wouldn't have all. Remember, your descendants will be as numerous as the stars, right?
Well, I think at the core of that question is like, right? is God's will always taking? You can't have sovereignty of choice and then God's will always manifesting, right? So he's got to bless Abraham.
By that logic, then would Abraham, okay, so let's just say the right way would have been Adam and Eve, right? It would have been one man, one woman. If you just had Abraham and you just had Sarah and you didn't have anybody else involved in any of this stuff, you would not have your descendants will be as numerous as the sands on the beach. That'd be number one. But then you can also make the case of what you're saying right now, which is, well, they didn't live the right life, but the Lord used it to his glory or whatever. And so therefore we did have this. It's like, so what you're saying then is like their sin was part of God's plan.
Well, I can say this because I've heard that a lot. Number one, I don't know. So if Abraham and Sarah were just to carry on, the two of them, who's to say they wouldn't be like the sands of the sea? Who's to say? I don't know. They could have had a different. Isaac could have done something different as a cascade.
Like a clown car.
Well, look, I want to point something out here.
I just don't see how I can make that. I can't use my adductive reasoning to be able to connect those points. I can only deduce that God is going to bless and fulfill his promises irrespective of people's shortcomings, the same way he did with David and Solomon. So he's going to bless them even if they sin, if they're fallen.
Well, I think if you look at the Abraham and Sarah story, like, do you see the drama of it? She was like frustrated because she wasn't having any kids. So she like told him to sleep with her maid. And then he did. She got pregnant. Now she hates that kid. And it was just like kind of chaos. And then that kid is the Islam path. So
yeah, Jacob and Rachel. Rachel literally pimped
out by his wife.
We read that together, Glenn.
Yeah, we were talking about that. No, you're gonna go bang her tonight because I got these fruits.
Well, I see what Kate J's saying. What we use for evil, God can use for good. Okay, well, fine. the fact still remains that if it weren't for that evil in the first place, assuming that's what you want to call it, if it weren't for that sin in the first place, we would be completely different. We'd be in a different like time stream. It's like freaking Marvel's.
Yeah, probably better off, to be honest with you.
Like Thanos, having the figure.
Well, it's like, so
you know, the thing
we were
is,
talking about like the marriage.
Either God knows the plan or he doesn't know the plan. So I'm going to say now. Here's what here's my take on the whole thing. Just before I don't want to get facetious about this, but my take on the whole thing is this: is that the way we did marriage back then in the Old Testament was polygyny. Well, yeah, one man, many women. Okay, open on his end, close on all his bitches end. Like it's the Justin Waller effect. Okay, basically. But the thing is, that's how we used to do it. And the more powerful a man was, the more wives he could have, the more. And by the way, this is not just Jewish culture. This is Babylonian culture. This is like any of the cultures of the Middle East during that time were doing exactly the same thing. A powerful man was defined by three things: territory, resources, and access to many beautiful, hopefully virginic women at that time. And it's not, like I said, it's not even the Middle East. You can go look at like Scandinavian countries, like the Vikings at the time. Well, that time, but like later on. The more wives they had, the more slave girls they had, meant that the guy was more higher in the status. Like he was able to have those things. So you have like even like tribal chieftains in the Amazon rainforest followed the same pattern. So if you've got a powerful patriarch like Abraham, the reason why we know he's a very rich, very powerful, very high status, high value male is because he has territory, he's got resources, and he's got his O's, right? So but that's the way we did it then. Then now we move things up. We move the timeline up into the 20th century, or well, into the the Middle Ages, right? Then you move it into the Renaissance period. And you still see the powerful men have like mistresses and such, but like we're looking more towards like one man, one woman. And now we think of this as like, well, it was Adam and Eve, right? It gels with the Bible and everything. And so we're kind of coming full circle. But the fact of the matter is that back in the Old Testament, the right way to do it for a high status guy was to have many women. And I don't think that's necessarily even, I don't think it's a sin. And I don't think it's necessary. It's just the way that they did it then. And this is how we do it now. Was it right then? Yes, it was. Was it approved by God? Apparently it was, because Abraham had two wives and many concubines, and Solomon had 700 wives or some shit like that. But like David, for example, sees Bathsheba bathing and he has her husband knocked off and he goes and gets after it with her. Was that bad? Was it sin? Yes, it was. But the thing is he's a powerful guy. He's King David. He can do whatever the hell he wants to do, right? He's a king. So it was right at that. It was right at that time. It is wrong now, because if you look at marriage is not like, I'll tell you right now, Christianity, Judaism, Islam do not have a monopoly on marriage. People in feudal Japan who knew nothing about the Middle East were still getting married. People in China, people in India, people in even American, Native Americans were doing exactly the same thing. They had their different ways of doing it, but they were still one man, one woman, or it was one man and a few, his wives or his whatever, he has his children and that kind of stuff. Even isolated societies on islands in the South Pacific were doing exactly the same thing. So there had to have been some sort of, unanimous thing for humanity. This is how we do things. And then later on, that became wrong. And the way we do it is right now. So when we're talking about the Old Testament versus the New Testament, I don't see any conflict between those two. I know I try to make their one just to sort of get people to think about it. But I think that marriage, the way that we do marriage, sure, does God want us to get married? Sure. But does that necessarily mean that it's the same thing in the Old Testament as it is in the New Testament? And I would say no.
Well, I would say the definition of marriage, the way that God created it, was one man, one woman. We hear Jesus reference that in the New Testament in Matthew, as it was in the beginning, when man leaves his mother and father and he clings to his wife, the two become one flesh. So it wasn't wives. It got Jesus in the New Testament is saying, hey, the way that we were doing marriage is supposed to be was this way. Now, all this other stuff was allowed, but that wasn't the intent or purpose for it.
Exactly.
It was, it's like, so it wasn't necessarily a sin, but it would be like it wasn't. You just using this for the wrong, or you're using it the wrong way. It should have been done this way. Let's go back
if tomorrow, through say some weird disease that that 90% of the male human population was killed off and there's only 10% left,
Oh God.
I guarantee you religion and society would change to becoming more polygynous to repopulate.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There'll be some reason.
Absolutely.
Oh, hey, you know what? The way they used to, it's even in the Bible because they used to do this in the Old Testament.
And Isaiah said, like in Isaiah 4, it says, like, you know, there's gonna be 7 women to every man crying, please let me marry you, take me as your wife, so I could be I could stay away from the shame. Right?
It's a latent purpose of religion, is what it is. It's like it's similar to like when like what is it? You're not like Jews are not Hasidic Jews are not supposed to eat pork, right? They can't eat bacon, they can't eat ham, can't eat shellfish and hooved animal, unclean animals. Same thing applies to Islam too, by the way. But those are like religious proscriptions against certain dietary things because you could probably die from trichinosis back then because you're eating uncured ham. Now we have ham for Easter Sunday, right? So it's did it have a purpose? Yeah, it did. Well, it's easier to tell a bunch of people to say, hey, look, the Lord said don't eat those animals because you'll die. But the Lord said not to, and so people stop doing that. And is it metaphorically true? Yeah, don't do it because we don't want our people to pass away. But now we realize that you can cure ham and you can have kosher, Hebrew National kosher hot dogs, and they taste pretty damn good. Because a rabbi said shalom aleichem and you can eat the hot dog now, right? So the whole thing is what's the latent function now? That's just like dietary prescriptions. What about how we're going to marry? How are we going to how do we interpret this as far as doctrine? And I think really we kind of like interpret that like on the fly. Like what's going on? Hell, we're doing it right now with feminism in the church right now, more or less. And so whatever puts asses in the seats, now suddenly that's something that gels with the Bible because we just kind of interpret it a little bit different. And, ladies, you don't have to submit to your man only if he's like perfect and he's a badass and he's a high value guy and he's really reading his Bible a lot and he does these things 10 times a day. Then you have to submit to him. But not, if he starts slipping, then, it's back on you again.
I want to point out something about marriage.
Doctrine, by the way. I'm not saying that's faith. I'm saying that's doctrine.
Let me point this out. All right. In colonial America, marriage was considered a private matter authorized by the church. Licenses were primarily used to ensure the marriage complied with religious rules and values, such as against bigamy, incest, and homosexuality. That was all. That was the only. There was no marriage license with the state in colonial America. Okay. And then after the American Revolution, state yards started using marriage license as a method of racial segregation. So you can't marry that person over there because of their skin color.
Oh yeah, that was miscegenation is what that was. There used to be, I think it was miscegenation. I forget how to.
Yeah.
Correctly.
And then by the time of the 20th century, many states had a anti-miscegenation law that prohibited interracial marriages. After the civil rights movement. So it's like, again, if we go back to what worked, the state was out of marriage. Let's just get the state out of marriage like that. But that's never going to happen because it's $1 billion industry. Divorce is $1 billion industry. So you're not going to get the girl to say, oh, yeah, I don't want a marriage with the state. But if you do find a girl that says, you know what, yeah, I'll get a marriage without the state. That means to me that's genuine desire. She's more into you and to the relationship she has with you than she is concerned about her safety net. Would you agree?
I think that it's and I'll just leave you guys with this because I got to bail pretty soon. But we got
to run too.
When I talked to Abu American and I talked to him about his situation, he literally cannot get a marriage license for his 3 or 4 wives, right? That's not going to happen. He's certainly not in the United States. I don't know how it works. I think he's in Germany or he's somewhere else. Dubai, maybe you can do it, right? But the thing is that it doesn't matter to the women who are his wives because they are on board with their religion and they are so devoted and so convicted in their religion that's just how it is, because they know, they trust in Allah to be a part of Craig's faith, and they think he's and he is, and it's always has been. He's very dedicated to all of his families and all of his wives, and there is no contract amongst them whatsoever, because it's a patriarchy. He has the authority to do it, and the women go along with it not because they're slaves or anything, but because they sincerely believe and they're sincerely convicted of their religion. And it's very much like what John was saying a minute ago, is like, I would not want there to be a contract, but if your father wanted it or he didn't want it, I would prefer there wouldn't be. Excellent. I'm all for that. In fact, I think that's probably the first place we need to start if we're going to talk about marriage reform, is start work. It needs to be based, fundamentally grounded in religion. It needs to be fundamentally grounded in a woman and a man who are so wrapped up in each other that God is the third person in their marriage, and then that's the authority in their marriage. The authority, the man, and the authority. It goes God, the man, the woman, the kids, and the puppies, the puppy dogs, right down below that, right? And each one has their. I've shown you the umbrella illustration I was going to use for. I think maybe you guys have seen that from my fourth book. Right now, it's God, mom, the wife, the kids, and then daddy's at the bottom. And all daddy's responsibility to do is just fund the whole bankroll the whole operation, more or less. Mm-hmm. But I think if you want to actually reform marriage, it needs to start with something very close. I hate to say this, but very close to what Abu American, in this Muslim situation, is all those women are on board. They don't want to be divorced. They love him. They love him, and they love Allah, and they know that they're going to, because of that, all of that arrangement, they know he's sincere in his beliefs, and they're all sincere in their beliefs. That's really where it starts. It's not about a contract at the state. That's why I said, I was asking before, who do you have more faith in? The state or your God?
Yeah, because I think the Muslims have that added element of it's a fear element, but what's the word that the Amish use when they exclude a member? To be shunned. To be
excommunicated.
Excommunicated, right? Yeah. So I think that there's within, they don't have the grace. They don't have that concept of grace in Islam. It's not the same. There's mercy, but grace and the whole faith through grace, that just doesn't exist for them. So,
I'll tell you something really comforting here, really quickly. Okay, when I did the background, when it took me 3 years to write Religion, the fourth book. And the reason it had to do it is because I had to be bulletproof. It is the most well sources cited book I've ever written, and it took a long time and a lot of tearing my hair out. Right.
Right on.
One of the things that because I covered a lot of different things in there, and primarily the Abrahamic religions, because that's what everybody wanted to talk about. And from the very introduction, I said, look, if you think I'm going to shit on religion, you're going to be disappointed. And if you think I'm going to reinforce your faith, you're also going to be disappointed, because it was meant to be an objective understanding of the whole thing. But in trying to maintain that objectivity throughout, and I went and I looked at Judaism, I looked at Christianity, Catholic, all branches, all franchises of Christianity, Islam, Eastern religions, the Sikhs, Krishna, Hinduism, Buddhism. I looked everything across the board. I knew I had to be as thorough as I possibly could be doing that. But I will tell you this, that from what you just said right now, there's only one religion that you are saved by grace and saved by faith. There's only one. Everything else is by works. Everything else is you got to earn it.
That's right. It's not a gift. It's not a free gift.
There's only one religion that is just free grace. It's like, here it is. Like, it's all on the table kind of thing. There's only one that does that.
And that's what makes us have to educate our women. They have to make the choice to submit. It's not a fear-based thing. It's because of the way that they've been enlightened, that they choose to do it for the benefit of their family and themselves. It comes out of a place of sincerity, and earnestness. But I wanted to point this out for some of the younger listeners that may be trying to understand the method and the reason why we have to be good at creating syllogisms and understanding the implicit lessons in the Bible. So like the Old Testament, right? You look at it and there's a bunch of laws, and it's meant for the Jews, and it's not every law, right? It's not including cutting somebody off in traffic or saying something to somebody in a way that's going to hurt them. It doesn't cover every single, it's not an exhaustive list of rules. And so you ask yourself, like, what's the point here? Well, it's a small subset of rules that illustrated that people generation to generation couldn't even keep that subset. So it shows the ineffectiveness of the works. So we just covered, you can't do it through your own works. But it also shows that the law is way bigger than you think, right? So if you look at a woman with lust, that's adultery, right? It's the thought that leads to an action. That syllogism causes us to understand that marriage is between two people, right? That there's an ideal way to live life, and that when we are encouraged by the Holy Spirit, we're going to see more and more refinement of where the sin is in our life. There's easy, low-hanging fruit for the new believer. Don't watch porn. Don't curse people out. Keep the 10 commandments. But as you go and walk in faith, the refinement, you're going to see sin in little places. You're going to see how pride hides. Pride hides all the time. You're going to start to notice where that hides. You're going to start to be able to pick it out, and it's going to be in places you never dreamed existed. And that's what Christ is trying to show us, is that this walk with Christ, this union with God, is an adventure, and it's always going to be coming more. You can't just stagnate and hit cruise control because you got the 10 commandments down, because then you're a legalistic asshole. There's way more to it than just that. And without that, you would never have humility. And in humility, you have this beautiful ability to grow. And so I want to encourage younger listeners to understand the Old Testament's law, why it was there to show us that it's not by works, and to show us that the law is indeed way bigger than that, and that we have to be able to understand this by having that dutiful obedience, every morning praying, every morning getting on your knees and praying, reading the scripture, fellowshipping with your brothers. These are the ways that you can encourage a walk with Christ that is masculine, truly masculine, so that you can be a good leader for a household. And it's not always about learning the explicit lessons within the Bible. Once you've mastered them and you've read the Bible 6-10 times, then you can start to go out there and start to learn some of these other things. But, God does have the plan for your life. And if you do that every single day, you will grow. And so I just want to let the younger guys know that.
So let's wrap it up. Like, we've been going almost 3 hours. Every time I get on a podcast with you guys, it's like 3 hours.
We could talk for like 8 hours. Let's hit these super chats quick that stacked up here.
All right. And then
roll out to you guys. But
yeah.
Easy.
See ya. Bill Clinton touched me. Great show, boys. I don't know. The Boomer and the Raiders. Roller left. Right? Showed that. You probably read it earlier, though. Rusty Fuel again. Thanks, Rusty. If you're spiritually centered on Jesus, the technology or outside world won't affect your walk with God and downstream your marriage. If she is also centered on Christ.
Right
on. Siege, thanks for the super chat. I think this is on your side, Glenn.
Yep. Appreciate Siege.
Another one from Rusty. Guys, relentless. Thanks, Rusty.
Love you, Rusty.
I met Rusty Fuel. Did you guys know that? Like, I met him out here in Vegas. He came to Miguel and Charlie's Cultivate Crypto conference, and we had a Bible study. He's a great guy. Great guy.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right on.
Yeah.
The descendants as numerous as the sands of the sea are the seed conceived of the faith, and that led to Christ. They are spiritual descendants of faith. Check Galatians. And then we got Rusty again. Thank Jesus for bacon.
Yeah.
True that.
Yep. Thank Jesus for bacon. Bacon is the best. But look, let's kind of like bow tie this all up, right? But we've been talking about a lot of things, like what guys should do, and how guys should act and operate. Like, we're talking about it from the Christian worldview, and although non-Christians could benefit from this too, but our audience right here, we're talking to Christians. Have a strong walk with God. Develop, understand, frame. Right. Once you get those two, you're good. Then you need to learn how to get a job, make a career. I'm doing a series right now talking to blue collar job makers that make over $100,000 a year. You know what I'm saying? So you don't have to be the Andrew Tate. You could be the electrician that makes $100,000, right? That can support a family. So establish a career, get a trade, stay in physical shape, stay in good shape. Your body is your temple. So be a good steward to your body. If you're not a good steward to your own body, how could you expect to be blessed with other bodies in your house? Right? So there's that. And then it's like, learn social skills, learn game. You have to learn how, in order to talk to a woman, you have to know how to talk to a woman. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you
Like,
also got to learn how to talk to people in general, because if you're going to do the Great Commission, guess what? You're going to have to talk to people.
exactly. So it's like before you could even think about getting married, first practice these things. First learn these skills. First have these things set before you even think about complicating your life with a woman. Because if you don't, rushing into it young, all right, may have worked in the past, but we're talking about the 21st century now. We're talking about 2023. How is it going to work? Just because it worked back then doesn't mean it works now. So now you need to be an already established man that has his life together, that makes enough brings in enough resources to sustain his own life, but also a surplus of resources to be able to provide for a family. Because the Bible even also says, if you're supposed to be leaving a legacy for your children's children. You're supposed to be leaving an inheritance for your children's children. Not just your children, but your grandchildren need to be getting an inheritance from what you provided and what your resources were when you were on earth. So make sure you have life set up before you complicate your life with the marriage. That's all I got to say.
It's wonderful.
I agree,
Love
brothers.
that, man.
Thanks so much, Glenn. This was awesome. And man, we went for 3 hours. And I'm sure we could easily keep going, but we'll do this again. We'll
definitely
we gotta do it at least more than once a month. So I think
absolutely.
Been
We got to start. We'll start doing like a mid-month thing. Call it like the fire. Like we were talking about, like the fireside chat.
Yeah, I thought that was my idea, but yeah,
great. I like that.
Thanks, chat.
What do you guys have coming up this week? Anything this week?
Nothing specific this week. Next month we got Rachel Wilson coming on. So she wrote the Occult Feminism book, so that'll be a good one.
Yeah. I'm actually talking to her husband Andrew on Twitter back and forth. We plan on having something set up. Actually, I invited him to come on today, and he said he would love to, but he has something about episodes that he has to get ready for Saturday on. So
awesome. And then we also we got some merch now. So check out our website, irondisciplespodcast.com. Yeah.
What?
We're kind of trying some merch out.
You guys got a shirt?
Yeah, we'll get you some shirts, bro.
Absolutely.
Heck yeah.
And then we also got a men's group, online men's group we're gonna try to do next month. We kind of locked in, I think, a date now on doing it Friday. We'll do an online men's group Friday, the first Friday of every month. It'll include access to our Discord chat and stuff as well. So that's also on our website if you're interested. There's 8 slots available. That's what we're going to limit to at first, because I think that'll just make the conversation fruitful and not too overwhelming. So yeah, guys, thanks, and we'll catch you next time.
Absolutely. 10-4.
Peace.
Love you guys.